Okay, Potter,
Here.
Bauer,
Here.
Hooper,
Here.
Ryder,
Here.
Wisman, absent, and we have one vacant seat. Oh, and McDonald.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to general public comment. This is a time, an opportunity for the public to make comments on items that are in the public interest and within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission and that are not listed on tonight's agenda. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and so I'm going to now turn it over to our moderator to facilitate the public comment period.
Thank you, Chair Potter. I see we have one hand raised in our attendees tonight. Taryn Obaid, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks, Eric. I want to thank the Planning Commission for your sharp thinking. The skills you bring to the decision making are very appreciated. And I want to comment tonight to thank you and to ask you to please do as much as you can to help move our city to understand how to best do trade-off evaluation. We get a lot of analysis, a lot of discussion and presentations that is in a very linear, presented in a very linear thinking fashion, and is, to my experience, very quite superficial. And I'd like to see our city move to a more robust discussion and presentation of short-term and long-term trade-offs, a discussion about what the costs are, immediate costs, opportunity costs, costs in terms of climate and carbon, for the near term, for the long term, financial costs for the near term, for the long term, impacts to quality of life, and what the trade-off is between the impacts of a development, whether it's emissions, noise, biking, cutting down trees, and to quantify. We get kind of a linear, like, oh, well, this is going to be good for biking, but then you read down a couple of paragraphs and you see, oh, they're going to cut down, half of the trees on the property. Or you see, oh, we're going to put in a concrete pathway and that's going to be cheaper, but really it's not presented in the context of, well, how much would an asphalt one cost, not just for installation, but over 20, 30, 40 years. So in business, you look at complete trade-off evaluation to understand full costs over the short term and the long term. And you guys are so sharp. I would just really love to see your thinking being adopted more by our city and leveraged more by our city, so we can make smarter decisions that don't sacrifice more than we have to, that don't have higher opportunity costs, that don't need to be there. We can have much more win-win-win decisions. It doesn't have to be so, so, I don't know, so near term and incomplete. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taryn, for your comment. And I do not see any additional hands raised from members of the public joining us. I will stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Chair Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. I will now close the general public comment period, and we're going to move on to item 4, which are the committee reports. So we'll start with our council liaison, Kevin McDonald.
Thank you very much. Council's been busy. I thank the Planning Commission and the PBAC for the joint parking workshop that was held on March 28th. And that's just the kickoff of quite a bit of work for our Planning Commission. Also, the council had a goals workshop, and I think that there's still quite a bit of interest in town in influencing what the top goals should be. And I think our committee will get a chance to talk about that shortly. We also met on the next steps regarding equity, racism, inclusion, and policing. And that's a very big thing for our community. I'm also super excited about the traffic calming and street safety measures that the city is taking. And the city manager specifically called out the Bassett Street traffic calming, the 5th Street Bike Boulevard by name at the last council meeting. So all of our work on active transportation is gaining momentum. And some good news, it could be that the council's back in council chambers soon. We'll be figuring out the hybrid Zoom and in-person meeting system. And of course, the commissions will be back in chambers soon after that too. That's exciting. Also note that the fairgrounds project, the fairgrounds effort, Healthy Democracy, who we've entrusted with this community engagement, the lottery for the said local citizens will be held tomorrow at 6, and it's on a YouTube channel. I'm not sure if staff's going to weigh in on any of the details of any of this, but that's very exciting. That process is stepping forward. YouTube channel of Healthy Democracy. And on a general note, SMART is holding a listening session tomorrow, 6:30, regarding the SMART MUPs, that the multi-use paths in town. And that's just a great way for Petalumans to influence SMART to deliver on active transportation paths. This year should be the construction of Penn Grove to McDowell, and it also should be the construction of Payran to Lakeville, and hopefully Lakeville into Water Street. You can see what great steps that'll be for active transportation in town. And that's what I've been hearing from the council lately. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Blake Cooper to give the report on the pedestrian and bicycle committee.
Thank you very much. Well, we had a lengthy meeting last night. We started off by talking about, at least from PBAC's perspective, our priorities with regards to the list of goals that the council put forward. And then after that, we had an even longer discussion and really a first bite at the apple with regards to Home Depot, or at least the proposed Home Depot site on the east side of town. Really, we had a lot of issues with regards to what they were calling pedestrian bicycle pathways that really weren't very clear, making use of existing infrastructure, and a lot of concerns with regards to a parking lot that looked like a pedestrian nightmare, at least from the perspective of people trying to move safely, especially if there are any ADA issues. So we gave them a lot of feedback, and we're looking forward to seeing what data might be presented down the road. We were a little concerned that they still haven't finished their traffic report yet. And that was about it. We went till about 10 o'clock last night.
Thank you so much for your attendance and the report out. And now Commissioner Wissman on the Tree Advisory Committee.
And I see that Rick's in the attendee right now. If we could bring him over. No idea how to do that though.
Well, maybe since we have a pause, I could ask if there are any other comments or reports from any other commissioners. Okay, maybe we can reach Commissioner Wissman now as a participant.
Yeah, I'm almost there. I think I'm over on the panelist side.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Still working on my video, but at any rate, reporting from Tree Advisory Committee, no meeting since our last Planning Commission meeting, but notably there was major tree planting, as many of you probably know, at Weisman Park, celebrating Arbor Day. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it as I was out of town, but if anybody else has any feedback on how the event went, it certainly was notable, and Tree Advisory up to it, working with Relief and some of the other organizations, put a lot of work into that. So glad that finally came to a successful day.
Well, thank you so much. Do any commissioners or anyone else have any comments on Arbor Day or other announcements? Councilmember McDonald.
Well, I just want to compliment Tree Committee and especially the Relief Organization. They mentioned that they came up with a $30,000 grant at somewhat last minute, end of calendar year, and they were able to pull this event together, which is awesome. But because they did so well, they're now in line for multiple more grants that are being offered to them right now, and I expect them to be tremendously successful going forward. It was an amazing community effort out there, or led by them.
Excellent. Okay. I did want to announce that tonight we will have Olivia Irvin from the M Group. She's going to be providing the staff comments as Planning Commissioner Director. So, Ms. Irvin, is there a report for staff?
Yes, there is, Chair Potter, and good evening, everyone. I am Olivia Irvin. I'm a Principal Environmental Planner, and I'll be providing the Director's report this evening at request of the Interim Community Development Director, Heather Hines, in her absence. I do have a handful of updates to share, and I will start with a introduction to Principal Planner Andrew Triple. He has recently joined our team and is filling the planning manager role for Petaluma. His experience in the planning field spans more than 16 years and includes a robust background in development review and long-range planning. He brings expertise in crafting policy direction for community revitalization, sustainability, and healthy community efforts. We're pleased to have the planning team and contributing his insights and experience. In his role as planning manager, Andrew will be routinely participating in future commission meetings, and he has turned on his video so you can recognize him in the future when you hear from him at a future date. I have a couple of other updates to share as well. There are 2 items that the Planning Commission previously considered that are on the Council's agenda for next week at the April 18th Public Council hearing. One of them is the zoning text amendment to Chapter 24 that the Commission recently considered and recommended forward to Council, and that is scheduled for consideration, as well as appeal to the Doherty site plan and architectural review approval. That project may be more familiar to some folks as the Woodridge PUD, and Planning Commission approved that back in 2021 and is going on appeal to Council. Again, both of those will be considered by the Council on Monday at the Council meeting. I also want to share that the general plan update efforts continue to move forward, and last week on April 7th, the city did host a public workshop focusing on the housing element. The team presented an overview of housing elements components and process, as well as its relationship to the general plan. The workshop provided an opportunity to educate the community about housing issues, trends, and constraints, and to receive additional input from the community on housing considerations. It was a great discussion. There was lots of great ideas shared, and breakout rooms where smaller groups were able to discuss in a more intimate setting some of the housing strengths and challenges that community members were observing, and focus on where areas might be most appropriate in the community for increased density and what heights might be considered in those. So the team is assembling input received and is working to develop the draft housing element, which will come before the Planning Commission for consideration later this summer. And as a reminder to the community, the general plan website has a wealth of information and opportunities to learn more and stay engaged and informed as the process proceeds. And that website is planpetaluma.org. I also wanted to tack on to what Commissioner Hooper mentioned about PBAC receiving information on council goals and priorities. The Planning Commission will also be hearing that at the next meeting, so stay tuned. That is coming for you as well. And the final item that I have to report out on is the status of the Fine Balance art installation. The Public Art Committee discussed and recommended at the March 1st meeting that the size of the installation be reduced to 2 sculptures and be at a alternate location, which is the H Street Pocket Park, which is at the terminus of H Street and the Petaluma River. And the council will be considering recommendations from the Public Art Committee on the Fine Balance project at the May 6th public hearing. Chair Potter, that completes staff's report out on the director's behalf this evening.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight and for that report. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to the presentations today. Our next item is item 6. We were provided with a copy of the minutes from the March 22nd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. And are there any comments or edits to those minutes, or can we approve them tonight? Any objections to an approval of the minutes? Okay, the minutes of that meeting are approved. And at this time, we can move on to item 7, which is our first presentation tonight. It's on the wayfinding signage. And my understanding is it's an informational item that will be presented by staff, but there's no decisions that the commission will make tonight. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Potter. I'm going to share my screen here. And all right. Okay, so my name is Ken Eichstead. I'm a traffic engineer for the city of Petaluma, and I want to present to you, Chair Potter, Councilmember McDonald, Commission members, and the public, the wayfinding program. And this project started somewhat innocently, and it was actually Councilmember McDonald that just said, how do we get from Crystal Lane roundabout into downtown? How are we going to do this with the boulevard? And that comment proceeded to develop this into a CIP project and lead us to where we're doing a pilot program. So we're going to have the Petaluma Boulevard South Road Diet is going to be completed the middle of this year. And there's some real needs for wayfinding coming into town. So the objective of this program is to provide direction for safe and direct movement of pedestrians and bicyclists, i.e. active transportation, to move from Petaluma Boulevard South into the downtown area, to transit, to the smart multi-use path, to Lynch Creek Trail. So that's the objective of this work. So we've engaged with PBAC, with PDA, in going through this effort, and we want to define. We presented 3 different design themes, and I should clarify here. This work was done by a nationally known firm, Merge, M-E-R-J-E. They've done work in Novato. They've done work in Cotati, actually 2 phases of wayfinding work up in Cotati. So I've talked to both those cities, to the city staff who were directly involved with the work that Merge did, came highly regarded. And they do this all over the US. So we went out with an RFP, selected them as the consultant to do this work. PBAC gave us direction on this. We looked at 3 different design options. We came up with an option 4 that I'm going to show you here, kind of a hybrid. Some comments that they had is to include the H Street signage, direct people to the Lynch Creek Trail, provide QR codes, which is definitely the way of the future for this work. So you have your smartphone, you can scan the QR code and get a wealth of information on Petaluma. And then we're going to be following up for future phases. Again, this is just a pilot program coming in from south of Petaluma, and I'll show you on a map. Some of the future work is to look at lighting, possibly some bicycle repair appurtenances with it at kiosks. There was some discussion with regard to a name change that might happen, but I think Bike Petaluma seems to work. And then add locations. Again, we want to roll this out into something bigger, but we're stepping in here with a pilot program. We went to the Petaluma Downtown Association. There's a roughly 50 slide PowerPoint that was developed initially when we began this work over a year ago. So you're seeing kind of a distilled, refined version, but there's been a lot of background work that's gone into this. We've went through and looked at all the different wayfinding in Petaluma, and I came into this process pretty innocently, but I tested myself. I said, well, how do I get from the Keller Street garage to Hotel Petaluma? How do you do it? And it's not actually really easy. So we take a lot for granted knowing our backyard, but there's a lot of improvements that we can do in wayfinding. So the Downtown Association heard this, was very supportive of it. We're going to keep them apprised. I should also mention, we did go to the city's Consultant Design Guild to have them look at our design. So this is the sort of hybrid option, or option 4. And again, I'm focused mainly on getting people to downtown, the transit center, the multi-use path, and Lynch Creek Trail. So these are some of the options that we have for that. And then this is what a kiosk could look like at Lynch Creek Trail, and kind of what the icons would represent, and the color choices that we selected. And you'll kind of see some of this is representative, at the SMART station there. Ingrid Alverde has been very much involved, and that was some of her original work there. So, and then we can look at some of the signage installations. So on the upper left is, if you're coming into Petaluma on the boulevard, how do you get to, you're going to be pulled off, or you're going to be directed off on Mountain View to go to a future bike boulevard. You could go down to H Street, so you could go across a signalized intersection at First, either on First or Second at D Street. The upper right is Lynch Creek Trail at Lakeview, what that'll look like. Bottom left is the kiosk for Lynch Creek Trail. And then the bottom right is the bridge over going over to Water Street, heading into downtown. So one of the things that the whole idea of a bike boulevard is, it's been in the bicycle pedestrian master plan from 2008, but I saw a real need for that with the boulevard, Petaluma Boulevard coming into play here. So we want to be able to safely direct people from the boulevard to get from Petaluma Boulevard to get to 5th Street. And we can do that at Mountain View. So we're going to have some signalization and some markings in the roadway to be able to do that safely. We're going to pull them off there, take them to 5th Street, and we've got a pilot project there. What happens with the boulevard is, you come into town, the width, the right-of-way width narrows, the curb-to-curb width narrows. So you go from a buffered bike lane up to Mountain View. And as you head into downtown, you go into bike lanes, or a Class 2 bike lane. And then after H Street, you go into a Class 3 facility, which for some people, you're not going to feel as safe unless you're comfortable vehicular cycling. But if you're with the family, friends that maybe are not experienced cycling, you want to look at either going to the bike boulevard or H Street to lead you into the downtown area on Water Street. So, and I apologize for this graphic. It's a little bit of a mosaic here, but the highlighted yellow circles are the areas where we would be installing signs. There's approximately 30 signs. This is draft at this point, but we're going to be starting on the actual design elements and the locations and the specific specific items of this. We have presented all this to PBAC, and we will be doing that again. So with that, and I should mention, this is roughly just over a mile stretch that we're doing. And again, this is a pilot program. We're just starting this. It's kind of, people are very interested in wayfinding, I've discovered. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions that people may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that great presentation. I know that there's been a huge amount of interest on the part of the commissioners to provide this kind of wayfinding and clarity to enhance our pedestrian bicycle usage. So we're very pleased to have had the presentation tonight. And I would like to open it up to the commissioners if there are any questions or clarifications. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. And thank you to staff for the presentation. I do like that QR code. I really applaud staff for, getting into the current technology levels. I was out at Bassett Street and flashed on the QR codes that are on the out there and got the survey access for that. And if I remember right, when this was explained, it's 2 stages. There's first going to be an engagement QR code, and then later, more technical route. Wasn't it a 2-stage QR effort?
It is for Bassett, and I want to, and I think we'll be doing the wayfinding isn't got as big of an impact in the public right away, so I'm not sure we would necessarily need to have that initial set up for the traffic circle at Bassett and Upham. I feel definitely it's very important to get to get feedback early on before we really harden the installation. And I wanted Councilmember McDonald, I want to give a shout out to Assistant Director Gina Benedetti Petnick, because the QR code was really, she championed that, and it is a big deal, and everybody's kind of embraced it. So I want to give a proper shout out for that. Thank you.
That is great. I think it opens the door for so many next steps that are great. I know at PBAC we were talking about intelligent mapping, smart mapping, so that you could connect up to the route, and not just the route as a car might go or as your Google biking effort might go, but to a preferred routing. So yeah, I think the QR code's opening a great door for us. Thanks.
Could I chime in with an additional clarification?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. Are you getting feedback? I am.
Just a little.
Okay, I'll keep going. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners and chair and Councilmember McDonald. I just wanted to add that to be clear, when we talk about QR codes, we're using that term to mean 2 different things in 2 different contexts, and I think Councilmember McDonald was alluding to that. And so in the case of a couple of projects, not this one exactly, but the Bassett and Upham Circle that was just installed, as well as the upcoming Pike Boulevard project on 5th Street, those QR codes are going to go up very early as part of those demonstration and pilot projects for gathering community feedback about how those are being experienced, what's working, what isn't, what folks like, so that pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists can all provide that feedback using a QR code that are mounted on signs at the project. And for this particular project, for this wayfinding, Ken mentioned this QR code is going to be used during the rollout, probably for a phase 2, and that would include access to mapping and maybe interpretive information that you might otherwise find on a sign that you could gain access. So you could learn about the historic rail depot, or you could learn about, you could be standing at the 8th Street Pocket Park and learn something about Foundry Wharf and the warehouse district. And you could access mapping, hopefully, at that point as well. The mapping is going to be a little tricky, and it's going to take us some time to roll out. So I don't want to put false expectations on the timing. That's probably going to be rolling out with a subsequent phase on the wayfinding, but it is absolutely part of our intent and goal. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Bauer.
Thank you very much, Chair Potter. And yeah, thank you for a good presentation, Ken. And I'm really happy that this is going forward. I really like the design, and I think the colors are great too. I just heard maybe that this isn't going to be the end of it, that maybe there'll be a phase 2, because I was thinking that one of the more useful places is to continuing the signage up Lynch Creek over Payran and then towards McDowell, because that is the safest way for bikes to get over to the east side. So when you're considering more signage going forward after this does become a success, as I'm sure it will, that if you really consider how to get people over to the east side, which of course Lynch Creek is the best way. So I'm looking forward to that in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Hooper.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the report and the slides. I remember this from PBAC. I'm incredibly excited to see that we've got this first step in wayfinding finally coming forward. It seems like something really universally in the community we've wanted. So this is wonderful. I was just curious, and I know I'm asking a bit of a difficult question to even guesstimate, but it's only because this was something we didn't really talk about in PBAC just because we were focused on the pilot. Assuming positive response to this, which I'm sure there will be, assuming relative success with the QR codes and all of that, what kind of timeline would it look like for the city to eventually really roll this out beyond a few select areas? And mind you, I'm asking conservatively, not an ideal world, but how long do you think it'll probably actually take?
Okay, a couple of items on that question. Excellent question. Thank you very much, Commissioner Hooper. One is we are currently going through the active transportation plan, the update of the bicycle pedestrian master plan. We have probably almost another year on that, and I'm just starting to look through all the projects that we would want to put into that. And we're also going to be developing a network of walking and biking ways through the city. So in developing those maps, which they take into account the high injury network maps and collision data and a lot of different elements. There's a lot of work that goes into developing a network to safely move about in Petaluma in a non-motorized fashion. To do that, I want to this wayfinding needs to kind of go step by step with that work. And I look at this as every year we kind of go through and add segments and do it. It's not going to be overnight. So I feel like it's going to be incremental steps as we move this effort forward. The other second item I wanted to make sure was a good benefit of going through this is any of the development work that happens, there's a component that work can go in and help with wayfinding. So, we can get people along Water Street to meet up with the multi-use path of SMART. I think that's a key linkage there. We can use Copeland in the future to get over to the transit center from Water Street. There's some real items that as development, if it is development, that happens, that we've got a standard here that the city can roll out that's been accepted, and it's the proper colors and the icons. So I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Hooper.
It absolutely does. And thank you for your hard work and for how thoughtful the answer was.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I'd like to open it for public comment at this time, and I'll turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair Potter. I do see a hand raised. I'll share my timer. Okay, and up first is Taryn Obaid. Taryn, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks again. I have 2 comments and a question, please. First comment, I agree with Chair Bauer. I live right near the Lynch Creek Trail, and it'd be great, even me as a person who's lived here for over a decade, when you ride your bike along Lynch Creek traveling east, you come to McDowell and it's not clear which way to go. You could go through Lucchese Park, or you could go left along the hospital. Then when you get further east and you get to Maria Drive, it's not clear where to go again. So I know that's not quite the complete Lynch Creek, but there's kind of 2 parallel routes to take. But it's confusing which way to go, I guess is my point. Because you see, there are 2 possible ways to go and you're not sure which way to go. And both of them do work, and it'd be nice to be able to be pointed in both directions. Okay, so eastward there, and then going all the way up towards whatever that park is up there, Prince Park. Okay, and then also the other area is the Smart Path as it goes under 101 and then hits, I think it's called South Point. It gets confusing there. It's cut off right now for a couple of years because of the 101 expansion, but it's confusing. You get up there and you hit South Point and you're like, wait, which way do I go? And if you go to the right, you hit McDowell, but then there's like, it's scary. There's no sidewalks, and it's unclear where you're supposed to bike. So if we could think through going further up there and make sure that's covered off, that'd be really appreciated. And then my final question relates to my first comment, please. And that is, when you get to some of these streets, such as McDowell off of Lynch Creek and such as Maria off of Lynch Creek, and if you're actually doing the Washington Creek and then you're encountering East Washington Boulevard, there's absolutely no way to get across the street. There's no crosswalk. And so, you know, you're looking left, you're looking right, and there's nowhere to go that's apparent. So I think signage at some of these highly uncertain and potentially dangerous, right, locations would really be a great addition to whether that's the first phase or future phases for not only people that aren't familiar with Petaluma, but even people that live here. Because when you're down in the weeds, it's not always apparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taryn. Up next is Sonoma County Conservation Council. I'll ask that you please state your name for the record. I've asked you to unmute. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks, Eric. It's Susan Kirks, actually using the council platform. And I actually wasn't aware that I was. So this is me. I'd like to ask a question and then explain why I'm asking it. Will there be a way to make changes to the wayfinding signage once it's installed? That's my question. The reason that I'm asking is in a GPEC meeting and a city council meeting several months ago, I raised the question about the name Lynch Creek Trail. And even tonight, I think it's been mentioned more than anything else in the entire meeting. And the trail, of course, is a major trail in Petaluma. But the name Lynch carries certain connotations that are traumatic, historically traumatic for members of our Black community. We really do not have that many Black residents in Petaluma, and I, along with many people, would like to see us do everything possible to be a welcoming community, including community safety. But this particular trail name, which is a major trail, even though the trail is named for a family whose last name was Lynch or is Lynch, it gives us an opportunity to think about renaming this trail to be something that is perhaps more historic, more neutral, and certainly representative of a conscientious action on the part of residents in Petaluma to be inclusive, diverse, and support equity. And to that end, I'd like to suggest to you as planning commissioners, if you haven't already read Greg Sarris's latest book called Becoming Story. Mr. Sarris is the current chair of the Federated Great and Rancheria, Indians of Great and Rancheria. And it is an amazing, actually autobiography and a biography of some of his ancestors, and focuses a lot on Petaluma with some really interesting names, indigenous names. And while I was beginning to read it, I thought this could be a wonderful opportunity to rename that trail and for something that's relevant to this area, the indigenous ancestry and history. I will be raising this again soon because I've been listening to meetings and I've seen that we have returned to just, talking about Lynch Creek Trail a lot, and no one has picked up the naming suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Susan. Okay, and I'm not seeing any more hands raised on this item. I'll stop sharing my timer. Back to you, Chair Potter.
Thank you, and thank you, members of the public. We're now closing the public comment period, and I will bring it back to the commission for any final thoughts or comments on this initiative that we're all very excited about, the wayfinding signage. Okay, well, I heard unanimously that the commission is appreciative of the staff report and of all the effort that's gone into this, the collaboration with the community and other departments and groups. And I also want to echo the comments that they look great and I love the colors. So we're looking forward to seeing them implemented around town. And thank you again for the staff report. So with that, I'm going to close item 7. And before we go to new business, I wanted to discuss that I will be recusing myself from the item regarding 890 Co-op mixed-use project on Petaluma Boulevard North. And it is because I am employed by Baseline Environmental Consulting, who was hired by the applicant to perform a hazardous materials assessment. And though I did not work on the project, I did contact our assistant city attorney, Mr. Bradley, and we discussed this in comparison with the Conflict of Interest Code, California Code of Regulations. And it was determined that I do not have an actual conflict. But to avoid any appearance of a conflict, I will be recusing myself from the item tonight, and I'll turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Bauer. I will be putting off my audio and visual for item number 8. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Chair Potter. I'll take it from here. So yeah, our new business, item 8 is looking at the site plan and architectural review and considering a residential density bonus for the site at 890 Co-op mixed use project. And with that, I will turn it on over to our planner, and I think that's going to be Greg Powell.
Good evening.
Excuse me,
Vice Chair. Say again?
Vice Chair Bauer, excuse me. Did you want to ask about?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, I do want to ask if anybody else has any ex parte communications they'd like to disclose. I see Councilmember McDonald has his hand raised.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was privileged to hear about this project when it came to Know Before You Grow in 2020, and I've been a member of that group, a co-founder of that group at the beginning, and in addition, I'd like to disclose that there was an inquiry from the public about potentially recusing myself because of that relationship with Know Before You Grow and Know Before You Grow personnel. But I've had the city attorney also take a peek at this, and he does not see any conflict on a requirement to recuse. There is no conflict, and therefore I will not be recusing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councilmember McDonald. And now we will go and pass it over to our senior planner, Greg Powell.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I've managed the design review, discretionary review, and environmental review for this project since about June of last year. And what's next is the 890 Co-op, a project at 890 Petaluma Boulevard North. I'd like to share a screen with you. So I'm going to start doing that and I'd love to have confirmation that you actually see something other than my face. It's a drawing, hopefully. All good? Excellent. So this is the project at 890 Petaluma Boulevard North. Tonight, just a second. There we go. Tonight, I'm going to provide just a kind of a general overview of the area, the site, the project description, kind of highlight the staff analysis that led to the environmental review that's part of your packet, the public outreach that's been done so far to include the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee meeting that was held last month, and then finally the recommendation. Just a second. Okay. So the project's located kind of north central Petaluma, about a half mile north of downtown. The downtown smart station's roughly 1 mile to the south. And this diagram sort of gives you just a general idea of where the project is. Just a second. Here's a closer view of the intersection of Petaluma Boulevard North. We've got Magnolia to the west of Petaluma Boulevard and West Payran, abutting the site and heading to the east. As you can see from the aerial photo, there's no dominant building form, setback, or land use. There's a gas station to the north, the Lucky Shopping Center kind of to the north and east. Varied land uses. There's no residential district abutting or confronting the site, but there are some residential uses to the east. Let's see here. There we go. Here's a street view of it, courtesy of Google. This is looking at the former restaurant site that was in a building that was constructed in 1989. It's been vacant for what I understand about 5 years. Petaluma Boulevard North has 2 travel lanes of traffic heading north and south. Serves as you know, a major arterial, and it's a thoroughfare for traffic coming to and from Petaluma. Payran and Magnolia are collector streets and arterials, but they're a smaller scale. It's single lane travel each direction. Also visible in this image is, there's sidewalks abutting the sites on all 4 corners. There's crosswalks. Petaluma Boulevard currently doesn't have a bike lane, but it's planned to have some sort of a bike improvement. Payran has a bike lane that's mapped, but not present anymore. There is a sign along Payran, but there is no striping anymore. It's faded over time. Off into the distance to the east is the smart rail and trail segment. And within this area are goods and services. There's restaurants, shopping, service station, and services. I'm going to zoom into this is a land use map. I'm showing this tonight just to give you an idea of the city's goal and vision for the area of the site and the surrounding area. To the north is the Lucky Shopping Center, that's neighborhood commercial. And then on all sides of the project otherwise is mixed use, which is a zone that encourages residential, commercial, retail uses. And a higher density is planned for, and a greater building intensity is planned for than what's existing in the area. Petaluma Boulevard North in this area is predominantly single-story, auto-oriented use. The trend for development in the general plan and the zoning is for something different than what's there today. This is a zoning map. It repeats with different colors the same concept that there's commercial and residential uses in the area. One thing to point out here again is that Eventually, the general plan is looking for this strip to change to have greater intensity buildings closer to the street, taller buildings. And the goal is to really have this intersection serve as sort of a gateway or an introduction of the downtown that starts about half a mile to the south. Now we're going to move on to the project description. As you can see from the slide, there's a lot of detail. I'm not going to go into each point, but the general parameters here is it's roughly a 10,000 square foot mixed use building. There's 3,000 square foot of commercial at the ground floor with 7 dwellings above. One thing that's important to point out, and it's kind of a basis for some analysis that was done that I'll cover later on, is the project has one very low income unit. Having one very low income unit enables the project to comply with the inclusionary ordinance that the city has, but it also opens it up for what state density bonus law mandates the project can have. And I'll get into detail on that later. Something that I think is really important to point out for this project is it has a lot of bike parking. It's required to have about 2 spaces. Instead, it has 14 on site in the secure courtyard, and then 22 spaces that are short term that are located elsewhere. And I'll get into that. So here's the site plan. Payran is to the north. Petaluma Boulevard is to the west or the left of the drawing. There's bike parking at the corner near Payran and Petaluma Boulevard North proposed. Sidewalk improvements are also depicted in this plan. Currently, the sidewalks abut the curb and the travel lanes along both frontages. The plan depicted here pulls them back between 4 and 7 feet along Petaluma Boulevard North and up to 15 feet from the travel lane on Payran. As you can see from this drawing, the commercial areas address the street. They are close, and there's a kind of a not a terrace, but open space in front of the building proposed along Petaluma Boulevard where there could be cafe seating. There's storefronts along both frontages and landscaping that separates the building from Payran frontage to sort of transition to the residential and the lower intensity uses that are to the east. Another thing worth highlighting that's present on this drawing, but it's not so clear, is that the existing restaurant use created a canopy to cover the parking spaces along the south edge of the site. The applicant proposes to continue with that canopy, but put solar above that. And then also framing the building frames the courtyard that is proposed at grade that's going to have workshop areas and sort of passive and active recreation areas for the users of the building. Now moving up to the bike parking amenities. This is a slide that was first presented at the PBAC meeting last month. I'd like to just double check. Can people see my cursor? Is that working? Excellent. Okay. So there's bike parking proposed again at the corner of Petaluma Boulevard North and Payran. Also bike parking down here at the south west corner. And of note, there was a comment made at the PBAC meeting that the bike parking that's exterior to the building should be safe and lit at night. In response, the applicants revised the project to put a light bollard at this location here at the southwest corner. There wasn't a need, we felt, to put one at the north because there's a street light that should illuminate that area. Also of note on this drawing is I'll just call it the restoration of the Class 2 bike lane along Payran. Bike parking and repair would be located in one of these buildings here where my cursor is. And then also within the public realm along Petaluma Boulevard North, they propose to put a continuous bench. It's about 2 feet deep that'll further buffer and separate the pedestrian environment on the sidewalk from the travel lane on Petaluma Boulevard North. Moving up to the second floor, the project would have 7 dwellings, 4 facing Petaluma Boulevard North and 3 along Payran. Also along Payran would be 2 guest rooms that are all intended for users of the site. So the idea with this, according to the applicant, is instead of having large dwellings with guest bedrooms that aren't used that often, these guest bedrooms would be used sort of as an extension of the living area for any of the dwellings on a per night or per sort of as part of the rent. The second floor dwellings are also accessed from an exterior terrace that's located along the south and east edges of the building mass. That provides access and also an open space, a usable open space opportunity. Above the Payran building, that's the 2-story building that I'm highlighting with my mouse. The workshop area where the mouse is or the cursor is now, and the parking canopy would be solar panels. On this view, this is the upper floor along Petaluma Boulevard. This is the loft or the bedrooms for the 4 dwellings. Above the dwellings along Payran would be a roof deck to have vegetable gardens and more usable open space for the occupants of the site. Also included for all of the dwellings are balconies. There's balconies either facing east, north, south, or west, depending on the unit. Now we're moving on to the elevations. Of note, and I think you can see these on the slides, is the building includes several building materials. There's metal siding, wood siding, and something that's I think unique is the use of weathering steel. They haven't designated whether or not that's going to be a Corten steel, but it's a steel that rusts and then sort of self-preserves. And it's quite attractive and charred wood. The building mass is broken up by balconies along each building frontage, varied building form that there's a 3-story building facing Petaluma Boulevard North, 2-story facing Payran, and storefronts. The size of the windows and the orientation helps sort of broadcast or telegraph to the community commercial spaces along Petaluma Boulevard and distinct commercial spaces along Payran Street. There's varied building setbacks along each frontage, and then along Payran in particular, there's landscape planters that are at the foot of the building to separate the building from the adjacent sidewalk. This is the elevation that faces east and south, the sort of the non-public facing elevations, either facing the retail uses to the east and south. Also visible from this view are the balconies. There's some Juliet balconies on the 3rd floor of the dwellings that face Petaluma Boulevard North. Next thing I'd like to talk about is the improvements to the right-of-way. There's been some discussion at the PBAC meeting and some communications that have arrived today about the proposal to have a bulb out. And actually, I'm just going to back up to a different slide so we can talk about the features while you have at least something to look at. The design that was submitted originally to the city did not include the bulb out. The bulb out was at the direction of the Public Works Department. And one of the key things, and I had to remind myself of why bulb outs are in projects, is bulb outs are done to enhance the pedestrian environment. And they do so by, in this case, decreasing the distance it takes to walk from the sidewalk along the site to the north. So instead of it being 100 feet, it's shorter, and shorter helps you get across the intersection more safely. The bulb outs are generally put in areas where the city wants to slow traffic down. If the road is really wide, it's really easy to speed because you lose the sense of, I guess, the scale. And so it encourages higher rates of travel than when you narrow down the roadway by putting in bulb outs. This bulb out also creates opportunities for additional landscaping along Payran and, kind of incidentally, parking. Nonetheless, even though there are these bulb outs, the travel lanes are still city standard wide. The bulb out, at least at the corner of Petaluma Boulevard North and Payran, was designed with vehicle movements in mind of cars, transportation, buses, fire engines, and any semi trucks. So I'm going to go back to my, excuse me. Go. So the idea behind the bulb outs for this project was to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety and to diminish or lower vehicle speeds of movements leaving Petaluma Boulevard North onto Payran West. And, all right. So I'm going to move on to the staff analysis. The project staff report that you have considers the project in light of the Petaluma General Plan, the zoning ordinance for just standard development standards, parking ratios, the inclusionary ordinance, density bonus, tree preservation, and then site plan and architectural review. Highlights of the project's compliance with the general plan I've got on the screen here, but like to just put some emphasis on. There's goals and policies about infill development that this project serves and furthers. Affordable housing and housing in general. The city has a mandate to produce housing and affordable housing. This project does both. The project also has some sustainability and green building features that I think are noteworthy, and they're detailed in your staff report. They include extra bike parking, reusing building materials. The parking canopy that's there today, instead of demolishing it, it will be retained. Next slide, it's also in your staff report, is just a general zoning ordinance compliance table. The project complies with development standards for setbacks and height, open space, but it also needs an exception for the height limit for the primary building along Petaluma Boulevard North and for a parking reduction. The applicants propose to reduce the parking from 22 spaces to 9 unbundled spaces and 1 ADA space. And the idea behind unbundled is sometimes buildings have all the parking required by zoning, but they're not used by the tenants. And having parking spaces encourages people having cars. And so this project would unbundle the spaces from any of the leases or rental agreements. And the applicants requested that the parking be available for whoever needs it or wants it. In case the on-site users don't need the parking spaces would be made available to the general public. And so how the building can comply to zoning and not comply to the setback or the, sorry, not setback, but height or parking is providing one very low income unit enables a project to get a bonus. This project hasn't pursued the bonus of units, which is common. So the project could have 11 more units. They've declined to have that, but they want two concessions, which is height and parking. And the standard for the city to consider concessions is pretty much if the applicant meets the standard, in this case, providing very low income units, they're entitled to a certain number of concessions. And in this case, it's 2 concessions. Should a city want to not approve a concession like that, the bar is very high. And the standard is, it's really a sort of a public safety, health and safety sort of violation, if you will. And in the staff report, you'll see that there is no evidence to support the city making a finding that the concessions would pose such a hazard. Next thing I want to talk about just real briefly is trees. The site has trees on site and in the right of way. And to accommodate the improvements in the right of way for stormwater management, moving the sidewalks away from the curbs and gutters, the street trees would be removed. And in the city, all street trees are protected trees. And in this case, the project would result in the removal of 5 trees, 1 coast live oak that was planted just about a year ago, and 4 pin oak trees. And the proposal would be to put in 7 replacement trees. And the size will be, and the species will be determined later based on when they choose to put the trees in, what's available and what's on the city's tree list and what sort of like is the best choice at that time. But there are guidelines that the city has, and there's an approved tree list for that. Regarding site plan and architectural review, the staff report details how the project complies with these standards. And of note, excuse me, the staff report details how the project is a departure from existing development in the area. But even though it is, the area has no predominant building style, age, architecture. So having something that's different in this setting isn't a problem because there's a mix. The scale is different. The existing scale along Petaluma Boulevard North is rather auto-oriented. The setbacks are usually great. Parking separates the building from the street. This project doesn't do that. It has the building close to the street, which is the trend that's set downtown and also in the area where there's some older buildings where the buildings are closer to the street. This project would be a candidate for an infill exemption under CEQA, but it's not because it was a gas station site and it's on a list of Cortese list sites, which precludes it from being an exempt site. Nevertheless, CEQA has a different pathway to determine compliance with the CEQA guidelines for a project like this, and that's the community plan or zoning exemption, excuse me, it's not exemption, being consistent with the community plan enables the project to be compliant with CEQA. And the key parts of this are on the screen here, that city's analysis under CEQA guidelines section 15183 is limited to effects that weren't already analyzed in the general plan EIR. And attached to the staff report in attachment H is the city's analysis, where we went through each of the CEQA studies areas and considered whether or not the general plan adequately covered this project, and concluded that it did. And within the project conditions of approval are conditions that relate back to the mitigation set by the city's general plan to address compliance with the mitigation measures in the general plan. Lastly, I'd like to just quickly highlight the public outreach efforts that have happened or occurred so far. The project's been listed on the major projects page, where we've uploaded drawings, all application materials. The applicant has done something I think is rather novel. They have a website. They've painted the building windows with information asking for public input. The city's received 3 comments in the last couple of days, and they've been provided to the Planning Commission. Also, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee reviewed this project last month, and some minor project changes that I mentioned earlier were made to respond to that. So finally, my recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to approve site plan and architectural review, and to recommend to the City Council that they approve the density bonus agreement. If you have any questions or comments, I'm here. We also have Jeff Stutzman here to address any public works related comments that you may have. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Okay. I was like, my speaker doesn't work.
No, thanks very much, Greg. I appreciate that thorough presentation. And do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Vice Chair Bauer, if it's okay, I do have a presentation, and I don't want to abuse your time, but I think it's about 6 to 7 minutes, if that's okay.
Yes, please go.
Okay, appreciate that. Greg did a great job describing the project itself, and so I think we're going to focus on more sort of our motivation be trying to build this. On the call are myself, I'm Matthew Ridgway, one of the co-applicants, and then my wife, Dawn Hagstad, is the blonde with the emoji computer screen in front of her on your screen. And then I suspect the second Matt Ridgway is Jem Adebeck with Baseline, who's done the environmental analysis that Greg was referring to. And then we have a couple other folks, Dave Alden, who's been a great asset to us in terms of understanding the entitlements process in Petaluma. We are not developers, so this is all new to us, and Dave's been great in helping us navigate that process. Otto Condon, who's our architect with ZGF, is on the line, and then Tanya Schramm, I think, is not in the participants list, but in the other list is with Summit Engineering out of Santa Rosa, and as our civil engineer. So they're all here available to answer questions. I'm not going to have any of them speak, so they're just here for your edification if there's any questions that you have. This project has been a long-held ambition for myself and Dawn and our family. And so we're really happy to finally be at a point where we're maybe going to get entitled to actually build something. Our vision is that this is a cooperative project. Greg did a great job describing many of the cooperative or communal areas. We have common kitchen and dining. The workshop makerspace will be a common use by all residents. The ground floor secure courtyard will be available not just to residents, but also to the businesses. The rooftop garden, we hope, is a place where you can grow food for the residents. And the terrace area that Greg pointed out is something that we are still really excited about. All of the residents access from the second floor. Before Dawn and I moved back to California, we're both originally from around here, Dawn much more so than me. We had lived in Washington, D.C. for the last 5 years and just really fell in love with the porching culture in Washington, D.C., where people just go out on the porch in the hot evenings or when it's cooling off and just spend time visiting with neighbors. And so we're hoping that terrace area is another communal area where people can just be together. Another major premise of this project is that it's multi-generational. So I have aging parents. We have 3 adult children. We don't have any grandchildren yet, but our fingers are crossed. And we would like to have this be a facility where all of those are looking after one another. But despite the fact that we do have a lot of interest in having some of our family and friends join us, there are still units available for others. So this is going to be not just a family location, but a place where we're welcoming others to our community, and we look forward to that. Another major principle of this is that we're really trying to make it as affordable as possible. Greg talked about the very low income unit that we'll build, but we're also trying to build the project as a whole as inexpensively as possible, so that we can deliver the units to our family and friends and others who want to join us as affordably as possible. So we're doing that in a number of ways, including small units, as Greg noted. Many of the units, 3 of them, are less than 350 square feet, and none of them is more than 1,060 square feet. So they're all relatively small by US standards, and we're compensating that with all the common spaces. And then we're also intending that we're going to build really good finishes, some of the ones that Greg talked about, but with really good materials, but with not a lot of finishes. So we're hoping to use cross-laminated timbers for some of our framing. And if we do that, then we'll just leave the wood exposed. We'll probably do concrete floors on the first floor and other things of that to just sort of reduce our construction costs. This is not a profit-motivated development for my family. Honestly, we'd be very happy to get whatever we put into it back out at some point. But I also do think it's potentially a good proof of concept for how to build differently in a place like Petaluma. And so I think if we can pull this off, it maybe stands as a good model for others on how to build more inclusionary housing within Petaluma. And then Greg talked about a lot of the sustainable things we're hoping to do as well. So things around the solars and walk and bike oriented travel, unbundled parking, trying to do as little parking as we can, not because we're hoping to displace cars onto the street, but because we're hoping to disincentivize people from owning a lot of extra vehicles. And so we're hoping that this will be a project that also is a model for low vehicle ownership. And so we will accommodate the parking on site, but it just won't be at the typical ratios that you see elsewhere, where they're more auto focused. We are not having, well, there's a reduced reliance on fossil fuels. We won't have any gas per the city's ordinance. We also have a heavy emphasis on doing our own composting and reducing our waste. Greg mentioned we also hope to recycle as much of the current building as possible or reuse it. So there's major elements of the kitchens and so forth in the current restaurant that we'll literally reuse in the kitchens that we build for the communal space, provided that the city allows us to do that. And then bioretention planters within both in the streetscape improvements on both Petaluma Boulevard and Payran. So that's it. We really appreciate your time. We're really excited about this project. It's been a long time in the making, and we really look forward to building it if we possibly can. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Matthew. We'll now move on to questions from planning commissioners. And then after that, we'll go to public comment. So commissioners, council member, raise your hand if you would like to ask questions of the applicant or our staff. Okay, I see Commissioner Hooper.
I first just want to say how much I absolutely adore this project. We saw it at PBAC, and I mean, I reread through the report, went through the documents, but again, I love this project as an example of needed infill in Petaluma, needed housing. So I just want to set that aside because my questions are mostly with Public Works at the moment. I was looking at public comments, and I do have a little bit of concern along West Payran, so I did want to ask a few questions. One is, do we have an idea for circulations, especially around trucks and deliveries for that street right now? Is there any data for that?
Hello, this is Jeff Sussman, city engineer, Petaluma. We don't per se have the data on what the circulation is for large trucks. Obviously, we know that they're going to be coming in to refill at the gas station and or go into Lucky's for delivery. So most likely they'll probably be coming in off of Petaluma Boulevard versus coming in from Washington up Payran.
Okay. And then in terms of the actual the actual frontage for West Payran for where this project site is. I mean, really the project length on West Payran is the entire length of that road for when it is wider. Once you pass that to the Del Olmo housing project right next to it, the road narrows up again. So I guess my question is, was there a reason? Because right now it's red stripe curb the whole way through. It seems like it's dealing with heavy influx having out and then a heavy outpour. Was there a reason in the first place why there was the difference between the frontage, between the narrowness of the frontages? And I only ask because I see the Safeway right above it. I've been in that area quite a bit. You do see a lot of inflow and outflow from the Safeway. So I'm just wondering if it was that wide in the first place because of the traffic flow.
No, if you look at the street view, I forget what the exact width of that section is, but if you take a 12-foot lane, you add in what the bike lane needs to be at 6 feet, you don't have that additional room for an 8-foot parking lane. So you're going to sacrifice something. You cannot squeeze all that in. That's kind of what happened on the boulevard, is where you try to sacrifice 4 lanes of traffic at 10 feet with a 7-foot bike lane. So in this case, to accommodate the bike lane and travel lane, that remaining 5 or 6 feet was kind of unusable. So striping it red was really the only option, unless you wanted to not have a class 2 bike lane.
Got it. What you're saying. Okay, thank you. I assume comments will come later, so I'll stop here.
Great, thank you very much, Commissioner Hooper. Who is next? Commissioner Ryder.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks all for the presentation. I have a series of questions, so if you'll bear with me. For the applicant, I'm curious if you're willing to disclose more information about the ownership structure specifically. It seems like it could go different ways, and I was just curious what you're picturing at this point.
And Vice Chair, is it okay if I answer questions as they're posed, or how does?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. We're not sure. I guess so far it's just Dawn and I who have money at risk at this, and we feel like this has been speculative in terms of getting approvals and knowing whether the construction costs are going to come in reasonably, and so we haven't felt like we want to share that burden with our family and friends yet. So we're sort of trying to determine what the costs are before we invite others to join. But we have talked about, I think the very low income rent unit will likely be rented. It's likely that some other units will be rented. Other cooperative housing, either nonprofits or B Corps, or have an ownership model where you essentially buy shares, and a share might entitle you to a unit, or maybe one share entitles you to one of the small units, and 2 shares entitles you to one of the big units. And so we're contemplating that ownership structure as well, as we find that people are if we find that people are interested in actually purchasing the units. But at present, we have felt like this is too speculative for us to put other people's money at stake.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, there's lots of interesting models around co-housing out there. Great. And let's see, you addressed my next question. I'm curious about if there are any plans, this is probably a question for staff, any plans or expectation that this intersection at some point will be narrowed in a way that is similar to the Paloma Boulevard South project? Is there any upcoming things we should know about that might affect traffic at this intersection?
No, there are no current CIP or traffic plans at this time for any improvements at this intersection that would shrink it down.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a question kind of buried in the documents around a statement in response to a PBAC request for a bicycle interchange, effectively. If we're going to have the bulb out, how do bicycles get around it, or through it rather, like with a ramp of some kind? But it wasn't clear to me where that decision stands. Could someone speak to how that will be dealt with?
I think that if it's a question to me, I think that was one of the things we were contemplating. So the request was for a ramp that gets from the bike parking that's located on the proposed bulb and gets you back into the eastbound bike lane, so you can head over to the trails and so forth. That would come at the cost of some of the bioretention, and so we're sort of weighing whether that's worth it. There also is a corner ramp not very far away. It also wouldn't be unusual for a bicyclist to simply walk their bike off the curb. So we're that's one of the ones. We had 2 comments from the BPAC that we were sort of going to wait till we get further into the design before we can figure out what to do. But on that one, yeah, we haven't determined whether we want to accommodate that request.
Oh, so maybe I misunderstood the comment from PBAC. I was under the impression it was a ramp that was to take the corner of coming from Pelham Boulevard onto Payran to ease the transition for a bicyclist making that pretty extreme turn there. Did I misunderstand?
I know there was a talk about trying to do a parking buffered bike lane at this location as well. Maybe that's what you're referring to. If maybe Mr. Hooper has more insight into this, he's got his hand raised.
Oh, if I could just interject, I remember this discussion in the meeting. Right now, with where the bike lane lines up, it's exactly as Commissioner Redders pointed out. You run right into the bulb out. What we had talked about is having a bit of a ramp up into the bulb out so that you don't have bicyclists now riding around it into an incredibly narrow intersection.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question because the bike lane is outside of the bulb. The bulb will stick out less than the width of the parking. So most bulbs will stick out 6 to 7 feet. Parking will stick out 8 feet. So the bike lane will be on the outside of that. And so it will be in the place that all bike lanes are. So if there's some accommodation we could build, I'm happy to work with you guys to do that. I don't understand the request.
It's because the diagram you have shows the bulb out flush with the outside of the bike lane. So when you look at the diagram, I mean, at least what I'm looking at, I don't know if somebody's seeing a different submission. It shows the bike lane right in that line.
I got you. That's not the intent. The intent is that the bike lane is additive to the bulb out, not that the bike lane terminates into the bulb out. So that's just a misrepresentation on the drawing if that's what's there.
And if I may, I can jump in and show the plan view so we can at least point at it. Would that be helpful for the commission to see the drawing?
Yes, please.
Okay, excellent. So ideally, you'll see a plan showing the bike lane. And my recollection of the PBAC meeting was a couple of things. But before I go there, my understanding of the drawings is that the curb along the entire bulb out will define the 6-foot bike lane. So it wouldn't terminate in the bulb out. It'll actually be adjacent to and to the north of. And it would continue across the frontage also to the bulb out that would be proposed along Payran closer to the convenience store to the east. There was a comment I recall, and I first thought that's what the commissioner was asking about tonight, was to have a ramp or something to enable people using the bike rack to join the bike lane. And I don't know if that's part of the comment, but there was a comment at PBAC about that. So if you've got questions about the drawing, I can also pull up the civil plans that show how the automobile travel lane, the bike lane, and the curb and bulb out all exist within this space.
That clarifies my question for now, but others may ask more in depth later. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I have a series of other questions. I'll try to keep them brief. I'm curious about that. Certainly, we're going to talk a lot about parking tonight. And specifically, I'm curious if there was any conversation or consideration of working with adjacent property owners to provide that additional parking rather than a concession.
We initially had proposed a 13-unit development and then scaled it back down. And when we were looking at 13 units, we thought we probably didn't have enough parking with just the 10 spaces that are there. And so I did talk to the owner of the Fast and Easy. It's an L shape, so it's the Fast and Easy and the Ambrosia are owned by Barry Swain, although I think it's up for sale at the moment. I talked to him, and I also talked to the woman that owns the Lucky Shopping Center across the street. Neither of them were willing to offer us any parking to lease, and the Fast and Easy, which would be the one that's most intuitive, it's immediately adjacent to us, indicated that the leases for his commercial spaces have specific spaces associated with those leases, and so he's not at liberty to lease us any spaces.
Thank you for sharing that. Has there been any other consideration for other ways to reduce parking other than just encouraging them through not providing it like a car share on site or, and perhaps, I don't know if you're going to do an HOA eventually, but some sort of like bus passes for residents, anything of that nature?
So we are doing unbundled parking, and then we're going to charge for the parking. So that we'll be disincentivizing people from having it any, and certainly not more than one vehicle per household. The units are small, so we're not expecting that these will be terribly high occupancy units in terms of number of people per dwelling unit. So we don't, and actually having, there is a provision in the code that having one space per unit for a project of this nature is sufficient. So while it doesn't meet the code, especially as it relates to the commercial space, or the parking requirement, I'm sorry, the residential portion, I don't expect that we will have any shortage of parking. And we're trying to design this as much, and we have talked about doing shared vehicles that we would operate ourselves. I think we haven't, again, we're trying to deliver this project as affordably as possible and sort of bite off chunks of what we can do before we make commitments. So we haven't been willing to make commitments about doing car share or other things of that nature within the entitlements process. But that's something that we will explore if we're able to make it pencil.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess there's many questions that are perhaps far too speculative, but I'm just curious about the timing of, assuming things are approved tonight, of permitting and construction, just as we're ending the, this code cycle is about to end, and this project does fall under CalGreen Tier 1. So I was looking at some of those requirements and trying to like conceptualize how quickly things are going to move. So perhaps you and your team could speak to the timing of this, assuming all goes well.
I can try. I will tell you that I've done no developments. I have done home improvements, and consistently I underestimate the budget by half, and underestimate how much time it's going to take me by 3 times. But what we are hoping to do is to deliver this project probably within 2 years of when we have entitlements. That gives us time to do the construction drawings, and then we already have a contractor selected and who's been providing pre-construction services, which is Earth Tone out of Sebastopol, yeah, that's our hope. We also are hoping to, as I said earlier, use cross-laminated timbers, which would allow us to stand up the first floor in sort of a tilt-up fashion, so much less construction impacts, but also much faster construction. And we've also been talking about using modular construction for the the second and third floors. Not getting a lot of interest from modular construction companies because we're kind of small by their standards, but we're hoping that once we have full entitlements that they'll maybe give us a little more attention. So if we did that, that could reduce our construction time as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold off for now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ryder. Commissioner Wissman?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Just have one quick question, clarification for the applicant, and happy to answer directly. Under the density bonus concessions in the last paragraph, there's some commentary about potential tenant there, and a request that the applicant be allowed to select that tenant. And I just wanted to give the applicant an opportunity to expand on that a little bit. What's really meant by that, and if there's any more that you can add in terms of context or criteria by which that selection would be made, and your intentions for marketing that space for that community, and any other context you want to provide there.
Sure, you faded out for a second, at least for me, but I think you're talking about the very low income unit and sort of what our criteria is for that. The rent that we can charge for that is dictated. So I think it was $1,080 last time I checked. It's based on some ratio of what a person can pay who makes, I think it's 30% of median income within Sonoma County, if I recall correctly. So we will comply with that. the provision that we get to select the tenant is because this is a co-housing facility. So we are going to be living in community with whoever lives in this unit, and so we would like to make sure that that person has a shared set of values with us and somebody that we want to live in community with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Westman. Councilmember McDonald?
Thank you. A couple follow-ups on people's questions. And that one was one of the top of my list regarding inclusionary housing. So the housing ordinance requires the unit involved to be similar or consistent with all units in the development. And each of the 7 units is relatively unique. What unit are you putting aside, and how is that consistent with our ordinance for a consistency across the development?
The unit we're intending to put up is the one is one of the one that's 340 square feet. So there's 3 of those, and we would be putting one of those up. The other 3 units I think are 800 square feet, and then there's 1 unit that Don and I will be living in that's 1,060 square feet. So that's the makeup of all the units, and but it's one of the smaller ones that we would be intended to use for the inclusionary housing.
Let me bump the question to staff, the planner, and ask them. This is what staff is are recommending or certifying meets with our ordinance.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. It's always hard when there's one dwelling that's affordable to say that meets sort of the mix, in particular when the dwellings aren't all the same. The city hasn't so far made a decision which would be the affordable unit. When I've reviewed these in the past, it's a little bit of math to kind of say like, what is the trend? And the trend here is 4 of one type and 3 of another. But the ultimate decision on which is the designated very low income unit has not been made, but it would be part of the package that's presented to the city council for the density bonus agreement. And that is, unlike many things about state density bonus law, that is one thing that the city can have a say in, is which unit is going to be the VLI unit. And that'll be presented to the city council for approval of that agreement at a later date.
Thank you. Another thing I'm not absolutely clear on in the city's processes on these housings is how do you assure an apartment stays in the affordable housing inventory, and like who does the monitoring that in fact it's in that programs after a year to 10?
Well, typically there's annual reporting that is done to say, here's the unit, here's the rent. So there is a monitoring that is done. I can't speak to exactly what will be in the agreement, but the agreement will spell out how we're going to ensure for 55 years that there's a VLI unit available in this project. So it is a burden or a task that the city takes on to ensure that at least 1 unit is affordable.
Perfect. I needed to know how that stays in the inventory. That's great. Thank you. On the bike lanes, looking at that tight corner of Payran there, I'm wondering, the civil plans show like a single striping of the class 2 lanes, and I'm wondering if that can be explicitly stated out as both sides will be painted as a lane, and the traffic, the parking T's, the little white painted parking T's aren't considered the inboard biking stripe, right? There will be 2 white stripes. Is that correct?
You asking if both sides of the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it. Go. Please answer.
Are you asking if we'll be striping the left and right side of the bike lane on our side of the street, or are you asking if we're striping bike lanes on both sides of the street?
No, I want. I would like it to be clear that a class 2 bike lane has striping on both sides of it, not striping on one side and parking T's framing it.
I'm not opposed to that. That would be fine with us.
I don't know if that can just be taken care of as a city standard or needs to be a COA. And then I'm wondering where the bike lane initiates onto Payran. Is that an appropriate location for a couple of green boxes to show it's initiating here? Given the biker the target zone to aim for as they come through the the whole of the North Boulevard intersection. I would prefer, I'm not sure, I don't think they came up at PBAC. I defer to Blake on that, but it seems like a good amenity here. Can that be added?
Want to be deferential to Jeff if he wants to answer this, I don't want to overstep. So in my day job, I am a transportation planner and do a lot of bike and ped design. Normally you use green in locations where you're expecting conflicts, and that's not usually on the far side of an intersection. Usually it's across driveways or on the near side of an intersection when you have right turn pockets. But it would be unusual, atypical to put a green treatment at that location, but I'm not opposed to green treatment if that's what you'd like.
And to add, I mean, we could definitely look at it and analyze it and see if it is a good fit, but typically they are for conflict points. So we could just review NACTO. They're kind of the leader in the green paint, the conflict zones and all that. Just to respond to your other comment of some of these changes is that this process, if approved tonight, will then kind of move into the public improvement plan process. So we'll be taking somewhat of a design level plans, even though these are pretty far along, and conforming them into construction ready set of plans. So that's that opportunity to refine these little bit of details that need to be like the second bike lane striping or green paint.
That won't come back to this body, will it?
No.
That's for you to take care of. You're right. Okay,
Yeah.
I understand. Can I defer to Commissioner Hooper, who has got his hand up?
I just wanted to say, in terms of the green paint, and I don't remember where we fell on this at PBAC, but in terms of this being a conflict zone, between the trucks that haul through this area, the folks that use this as a bypass because of traffic elsewhere in the city, the Safeway and the constant traffic in that area, and the folks moving past Magnolia, this is almost always a nightmare for someone on a bicycle trying to ride around this area. So I can recognize where I don't have data behind this, but I know green striping came up at PBAC. I don't know where we landed, but it's in part because I've got to tell you, the fact that this would only be class 2 still incredibly bothers me, because it's this intersection component especially where it is the most confusing and difficult for people. So I would just like to support Councilmember McDonald's point about the green striping. I have no data to back it up other than just experiencing the situation and remembering the conversations that came out in PBAC.
Thank you. Appreciate that support. Hopefully we can go forward with that. I was also thinking, maybe I missed it, but I haven't heard too much about VMT. Does that have a relevance to this project?
I'm going to jump in. It does. The VMT analysis was conducted for this project, but because of its size, it screens out from additional analysis. There's a threshold for commercial, there's a threshold for residential, and it doesn't pass either. So it's screened out.
Oh, okay. I didn't pick that up. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't say it. So
yeah.
Thanks for asking. It's in the attachment H, but attachment H is 50 pages.
I got really deep, but it may not have got all the way through there. The Payran sidewalk is shown as 4 feet, and there's landscaping on both sides of it. And I'm not sure what our sidewalk width standard is, but I was hoping that we could squeeze 1/5 foot out of that so that it matches even the narrowest part of the fronting sidewalk on the boulevard. Can we take a look at trying to get 5 feet of sidewalk there?
Yes, and that's a great question. In the general plan, there are guidelines for how wide sidewalks should be adjacent to various street types. And we'll look to that to make sure that the sidewalk that is put in complies with that. And I think it may ask for more than 4 feet for the, just general circulation and capacity.
Yeah, we're not looking to scrimp on the public realm. It's at least 5, and it might be 6. Otto Condon is on the line, who designed the public realm improvements. But yeah, it's not our intent that we scrimp at all in the public realm. This is going to be our front yard.
I may not have said at the beginning, but I'm a big fan of what you're trying to do for the housing here, and the fact that you're putting in real mixed use in here. So, but one of the things in making a 15-minute accessible neighborhoods and things like that, it is sidewalks. And so that was a big one for me to see that those, where we can get it right, we do get it even right. Let's see, can you explain to me again why some of the mature trees have to go? Looking at the diameter of the trees along the boulevard, they seem to be pretty large trees, 14, 16-inch diameter trees. What's the need? And are they the ones being removed? Existing planting strip on Petaluma Boulevard?
Greg, I don't know if you want me to speak to that or.
Yeah, I can jump in at least for what's represented in the staff report. And just to clarify, I think the tree there's one tree along Petaluma Boulevard North, and it's I think the best condition, and it may be one of the larger trees. And the trunk may be about 10 inches in diameter at breast height. My understanding of the origin of why the trees are all being removed, and it's detailed in the staff report, is there are demands on stormwater control and drainage, and they require certain planter sizes. And there's also, I think, a goal to look at tree health. And I know that the city of Petaluma is very motivated to keep canopy, existing trees, as am I. But sort of a combination of the improvements for the sidewalks, getting the landscape planters enlarged, and it can't just be enlarged and have them function as drainage units because of the roots and the need to re-engineer the soil. And I've also heard that even though the pin oak is listed as a tree that's on the city's tree list, it's not always a great street tree. It's not a native. It's native to the sort of the Mid-Lakes, Ohio region of the eastern US. And so the goal here is to meet all of the drainage needs, enhance the planters, and create these planters along the street and the new sidewalks, is to take them out, put in new trees that are on the city's list that maybe do other things for the city. And one thing that I noted that in the city's tree list is local species, native species are encouraged, and they also provide habitat for other species that are, butterflies, et cetera. So, my hope is getting something that's native and a lower water use tree, which the pin oaks aren't. They're a moderate use, kind of as alignment of several factors that would, at least in my mind, support us taking a look at removing the trees and putting in new trees.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the sensitivity to, not removing existing trees and to, protecting existing canopies. That is a huge push and that we're working on. But I don't like the idea of trading stormwater areas for existing trees. I don't like the idea of trading existing tree for a new better species. I mean, the existing vibrant species, if healthy, it is the one to keep. And if I haven't heard mention of gray water, but I would think that tree demands for gray water, you have second story showers that can put sufficient head to put water to those street trees. If the city will allow the the public realm to be watered with the private water, private side. But I think there's a method here to redesign the stormwater such that some of the mature trees can exist. And I unless another commissioner jumps on that, I would leave that in the hands of staff to improve the design and reduce the number of tree loss. Because we've had developments come through here recently where tree loss was a major public furor. We don't want that again.
Yeah, and if I can clarify, Councilmember McDonald, I didn't mean to lead off that the stormwater management needs were the initial reason to remove the trees. It's just one of the things that I've understood as a factor. But if there's alternatives to retain more trees on site, I'm all for it. And we can work with the applicant to take another look at some of these trees and see, I want to note that the condition of some of them isn't so great. There's one tree that has moderate or better, but the rest are fair or marginal sort of in their health. And, the ratings are in the staff report. And
I appreciate that attachment. Yeah, it was good to have it included in there.
good.
Well, so I can take an aggressive approach to this. I'm leaving staff's hands. Then I guess major issue for me is that corner. And you know, I went out today with a trucker friend of mine, and of course the first comment he made was, all the corners in this town have black rubber on the curb faces, and this looks like one more that's just going to be very tight on the radius. Can I ask the engineers whether they have a standard, check the standard on this, and want to tell me that truck turns are not going to be dragging over the sidewalk there? Either the applicant engineer or the city's engineer will work.
I think we talked to the applicant a little bit ago, and they did design this based on kind of highway design measures based on radius curvatures. I just did a turning template analysis, and I used a WB 65, so that's 55, or 65, that's California legal. And it did make that turn. But as we go through, again, the public improvement process, those details we're going to refine and get a little more accurate and get it squared in so big trucks can make it. It's standard procedure for us once we get to that public improvement to verify all those things, that fire truck, turning templates, trucks, and all that work.
Yeah, as we're starting to review things, I'd rather that fundamental check had happened in the completeness review, not after it passes this body.
I said I did do for a WB 65. It does make the turn.
Meet city requirements.
Yeah.
Is that a 6-inch high curb between the two ramps? Do we use a roll curb or any sort of drivable curb between the two ramps, or is that a vertical face?
It would be a standard 6-inch curb. I mean, we have done kind of the rolled curb in very unique situations. Like if you go down to the boulevard where those bulb outs were installed on like Western and the boulevard, those have rolled curbs because there is no way to make those turns in the existing condition with the fire truck. That was the best option for those situations.
I think D and First might have those too. The new ramp improvements there.
D and First got revamped and reconstructed to pull it back a little bit. So they're not full 6-inch curves just because of the nature of the grades out there, but they are taller. They're about a 4-inch curve.
Oh, okay. So that's quite an expanse of concrete there. Plaza, if you will. I like the way the bike racks activate part of that space, but an awful lot of it isn't. And I like the short wall coming down the boulevard. And I'm wondering, can't there be short wall between the two ramp areas or some other way to make it look less expansive? No offense, Jeff, and I'm an engineer, but it looks like an engineer's playground there. It's just flush concrete, part of that. Can we do something to activate that?
Yeah, no, I think the applicant could definitely take a look at that and revise it so it is not a solid.
And obviously, the landscaping would block vision, of any height. Art would probably block vision, but there's got to be some sort of a fun that can be had in that in the public space there.
Just note there's at least 4 utility boxes on that corner as well, so there are constraints.
There's a lot of utility boxes out in that whole area. Yes, I recognize that. Okay, that's my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember McDonald. I guess I'll take my turn now. Many of my questions have been asked and answered, so thank you to my fellow commissioners and council member, but I do have a few questions left. One is, I saw in the report that Baseline recommended a vapor intrusion mitigation system for the site because of the previous gas station use, and I'm wondering if that's going to be employed and what it's going to be a passive system or a vapor barrier, or, it looked like just a recommendation, and I wanted to make sure that was going to be included in the build out.
I can jump in on that. It's part of the project to install the VIMs. And my understanding is it's potentially going to start out as a passive system, but the system will change based on construction conditions in the future. And it could be something that's an active ventilated system. But it's part of the project to have a VIMs, and there's sort of a specification and a standard for how they're done and then maintained. But it's part of the project, so it's not necessary to put it as a condition of approval.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, that's what I just wanted to make sure that we didn't need to put it down as a condition of approval since it's part of the project.
Yeah.
The other thing is, Councilmember McDonald was talking a lot about the trucks, and I was a little bit concerned about the turning radius too. And I too would have liked to seen it worked out before it came to our body. But I wanted to know that when the improvements do get sussed out in the future, if at that time they find that it can't work out and that it can't happen, what is the plan B? Is the plan B just to have it the way it is and not make those changes, or would that negate the project and it would have to be revised and be brought back to us?
I'd like to jump in on that point too. Just to be clear, my understanding of the bulb out is it was designed with a certain size vehicle in mind. And city staff and public works department has looked at it with that vehicle that Jeff mentioned earlier to ensure that it does work. So my expectation is that the ultimate design is going to look very much like the one that's presented to you tonight. And my thought is, if there's a comment from the fire department, which by the way, they've reviewed these plans and they haven't said so far that you can't get a fire engine around the corner, but if some vehicle comes forward that shows that it won't work, my expectation wouldn't be that we'd lose the bulb out. It would just be modified in some small way to the extent needed to get that radius to work. Having said that, all of the information I have in front of me shows it was designed to meet that standard. And we've got Jeff here to, add details, and the applicant can, attest to how they came up with the radius that they've shown.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure about that. I know we have other narrow streets in Petaluma that big rig trucks do go through, and that seems, to work out, as well as big rig trucks going through San Francisco, which, it's not ideal, but it works. Okay, I just kind of wanted to follow up with that. And then the other question, I was just curious about the retail space, and is there any, what's the anticipated use for that, or is it just not at all known right now?
According to the applicant statement, there's no known tenant, but they have an idea of in the future of having a cidery. And if they're pursue the cidery, that'll be an additional discretionary application if required at that time. But there's no named tenant or particular use identified at this moment.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. And then my last comment is also on the trees with Councilmember McDonald. I live quite close to this project, outside of the radius where I would have to recuse myself, but still pretty close. And I walk my dog there on a weekly basis. And I think the trees are in pretty good shape, to be honest with you, and they're pretty mature and they look great. So if there's any way for them to be saved, I would like to see that, because they do add a lot to the block and the area. And I know, new trees aren't going to be replaced to that size, and it will take some time for them to grow to that size. So if at all possible, I would like to see those saved, but I will leave that up to you in the future too, if that works out or not. And I think that's it. Those are all my questions right now. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. There's always just one more question, and you reminded me when we talked about commercial spaces. We'd be remiss if I didn't say something about the architecture and in planning review. But I'm excited about I think it's 4 commercial spaces that face Boulevard, and I'm wondering, do each of them have exterior doors? When I was looking at the plans, I thought I saw 2-door spaces for the 4 units. And could you explain to me how that works?
The site plan shows individual entrances for each of the potential 4 tenant spaces along Petaluma Boulevard North, and also 2 for the 2 spaces along Payran. But I also understand that they could be 1 large tenant or 2 and 3 or whatever. So they're reconfigurable based on what the market and leasing conditions would show in the future. But there are 4 entryways along Petaluma Boulevard and sort of identities that are framed by the balconies for 4 different tenants.
I do love the balconies too. Yeah. Thanks for.
And I can zoom in on the drawing if that would be helpful.
No, thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any more questions right now from commissioners? Okay, I don't see any. So with that, we'll go on to our public comment, and I'll let our moderator, Eric Roberts, take it over from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Chair Bauer. I see a few hands up. I will go ahead and share my timer. Okay, up first is Leela Shrestha, followed by the Tapestry host. I'll remind our participants joining us tonight to please state their names for the record. Leela Shrestha, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Yeah, did you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. My name is Leela Shrestha, and I belongs to the Fast and Easy Mart behind the construction site. And I'm the owner and the manager of the Fast and Easy Mart. We have some concern about during the construction time. There are some problem we face. If we face, I need the answer of some questions. Is that one question is that about the during of the constructions, how long the construction will happen, so that how long we will face the problem, because we will face some about the traffic, about the access in and out, about the sound pollution, dust pollutions, and construction heavy vehicles may come there, and other safety and health also, because our stores, Fast and Easy Mart, we are opening from morning 6 to 1 p.m. means that 19 hours we open, and we are very serious about the security of our business. So regarding this one, I want to know how the owners, they are arranging the safety and the access in and out. I saw in the plan that they are only occupied that area in the plan I saw, but during the construction, there may come the heavy vehicles like concrete vehicles, heavy vehicles, where they will park, if they park in our area, or how that will be affect us. And about it may be in our business can be affected by making the shadow and behind and the light. So regarding everything, I want to know that how long it takes and how they are planning this one. Nobody was asking me about this concern regarding this project. So I'm very serious about this. So can you help me to clear my questions, please? My question is especially about the access, parking, pollutions, and the constructions, vehicles which are maybe disturbed to us, and other safety, because there are so many homeless people are coming and staying from that area. So I'm worried about about the safety of my business. So I want to know how you are supporting us in our business. Yeah, I belongs to the Fast and Easy Mart, just behind these buildings. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Leela. Up next is V Tapestry host, followed by Chris RJN. V Tapestry host, I've allowed you to speak, and again, I'll remind our participants to state their names for the record.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Apologies, that's my business name that came up. My name is Eileen Clegg. I live in Bodega Bay, and I'm Matthew's cousin. So this is a personal comment. I think Matthew knows I'll have to share a little piece of family lore about him. He was about 8 or 9 on the beach making a sand demonstration of how he was going to become an architect. And he made sand houses and buildings and roads. And he talked about what the people were doing and had to break it to him, Matthew, you may not become an architect. You may become a city planner, which he did. We're all very proud of all of his good work for cities. But that story, it's actually relevant from the point of view that Matthew has always been focused on people and what they're doing and how they relate and kind of move together and work together. So let me speak a little bit to the values behind this project, Matthew's values that are actually, I think, in his DNA, because our grandparents had them and they were carried forward by our folks, his dad, my mom, brother and sister, and our families for many generations had this idea that families actually can be a community with multiple generations that stay connected, help each other, and enjoy each other, and go through difficult times together. It's a kind of a large, extended family. And Matthew has always carried these values forward. And as you know, everybody with families, it takes time and a lot of resources, to really support one another. And that's something that he has done all his life. And with 890 Co-op, it seems like he's devoting his talents really to implement these values. It's a long held vision that he's had. And 890 Co-op actually looks like it will enable for 3, maybe 4 generations of our families and friends to have better lives and well-being together in a community. So I hope the Planning Commission will support this project. And thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. And up next, we have Chris, JRN. Chris, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello, Commissioners. Christopher Neugebauer here. It's wonderful to see all of you once again. I want to express my strong support for cooperative housing, both the general concept as well as this specific project, as a way to achieve dense and transit-oriented housing without resorting to large-scale corporate development of the sort that we often see here, which inevitably leads to units being offered as rentals, leading to further enrichment of the developer, rather than building further wealth into our community. Cooperative projects in Petaluma are rare, and people, naturally being skeptical of the unfamiliar, tend to be fearful of them. And so instead, we get these developer-operated rental apartments, and they are driving wealth out of our city. We have a real opportunity here to get things right and to improve things for further generations by encouraging more occupier-owned dense projects. I'm in favor of this project being built, but I want to directly address the applicant here. Please make sure that this project is an exemplar of how good cooperative housing can be. I understand there's been a lot of written concerns from commenters with your request for on-street parking. It worries me that concerns like these are going to be amplified once you start building. So I hope that you can work to address a number of these comments so that even more people can see this project as the exemplar of the form that the rest of this project represents. If there are opportunities for you to deliver the parking for the location, such as by building underneath your building, please consider that. I imagine the expense would pay for itself given time, and it won't compromise our pedestrian and bicycle access to the nearby smart pathway. It'll let us build a properly protected bike lane sometime in the future if we need it, which wouldn't be possible if we had those parking spaces. This is a high traffic area. People are going to see your project. Getting it right the first time is going to mean that we don't have to unpick these misjudged parking allocations 15 years down the track. I personally live just up Magnolia. I drive through this intersection most days. This project looks exactly like what this area needs to be. It will be an improvement over the unoccupied building that's there. I think it's really important to make sure that people further afield in the community don't fall to hate the idea of cooperative housing because there's weird parking that's pulling out into the road. Cooperative housing is one of these best tools that we have to build up our density and increase our transit access and build wealth into our city. You're the first project of its kind in this city for a very long time. I'm really excited for the possibilities. The fact this is transit oriented and mixed use is just perfect. I want this project to succeed, and I want other co-op projects to be emboldened, not scared off by this project. Please do everything you can to make this project work well with the rest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your comments. Up next is Susan Kirks, followed by Cullen Redgway. Susan, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I would like to support the comments that Taryn Obeid submitted in writing. Taryn gives excellent commentary, does her homework, and I completely agree with everything that she wrote. I would like to say I also live in this area. This is my neighborhood. I'm in and through those intersections every day, several times a day. And this project is coming in under the old general plan. There likely will be redevelopment in that particular area with the new general plan. And with all due respect to the planner who described the area, the uses in the area and the residences and businesses were not accurate. I definitely would like to say that no on-street parking should be approved for this proposal. The bulb out, the descriptions of how great everything will be. This is a highly trafficked area. The trucks have already been mentioned. The traffic is constant. There may be able to be improvements in crosswalks by the city of Petaluma to improve safety, but this owner developer should not be given on-street parking for this particular development. I also hope you will address the concerns that were expressed by the gentleman who owns the store behind the property that's proposed for development. And lastly, I would like to address the issue of trees. I just have to ask you, planning commissioners, please have a higher awareness, a higher level of attention when one of your planners suggests to you casually, we'll be removing 7 trees and we're going to be replacing with XYZ tree, and then gives an explanation for why the trees are being removed. I reviewed the arborist report. I know who the arborist is. He works for developers and property owners a lot. I would not hire this gentleman to do a tree report, and I definitely know what it means when tree reports come in and say, oh, the condition of the tree is like low to moderate, we better remove it. So I would like to ask you to ensure that care is given to the trees, the existing trees that are there. Sure, add some trees, add some landscaping and greenery, but planning commissioners, do not let this pass you by. Do not allow the trees to be removed. Require that there be care given to the trees and adding more trees and greenery. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for your comment. Up next is Cullen Ridgway, followed by Jerry Wilkinson. Cullen, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello, hi, my name is Cullen Ridgway. I'm Matthew's son, so this comes at somewhat biased source, but I wanted to commemorate the project. It represents to me a future in de-alienating our community as residents of rental units and other housing situations. I also wanted to comment on the several comments on trees that I've heard. I study both permaculture and indigenous food systems, and I would argue that the investment in younger native trees or plants is similar to the investment that we make towards solar, where it seems like a higher upfront cost, but long-term ends up having more benefits on not only the human community, but also the ecosystem of plants and animals. That is all that I have.
Thank you for your comment, Cullen. Up next is Jerry Wilkinson, followed by Tom and Judith Wilging. Jerry, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Wilkinson, and thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. I do want to say that I like most of this project. I think it's a creative infill and a great fit for this location. The mixed use component can be beneficial to the community at large, so thanks for that as well. This item was brought to PBAC, and that is mentioned in the staff report. And earlier tonight, we heard some of the issues that were brought up at PBAC addressed, such as the lighting and some of the bike racks and so forth. I would like to bring up the concerns I voiced at PBAC. I feel the proposed change on Payran Street has a number of negative impacts that primarily may impact cyclists and to some extent pedestrians and traffic in general. The bulb out makes it difficult for cyclists heading north on Petaluma Boulevard to turn right onto Payran. Several commissioners have expressed already tonight concerns about traffic trucks making this turn as well. And the engineer's report suggests that it's not certain that it will actually work as currently configured. Of greater concern here is that the proposed parking for 4 cars in what is currently a red zone creates a situation of cars crossing in front of cyclists, a conflict point, or of cars stopping in a traffic lane to back up and park, or perhaps attempting to pull into traffic to leave one of the parking spots. All of those are potential conflicts with cars and cyclists. In any case, cars are unnecessarily crossing a bike path at or near this intersection. I don't think it's good practice for the city of Petaluma to relinquish public space at the corner of Petaluma Boulevard and Payran in order to create these spots for this project. Future plans envision for this area to accommodate increased cyclist traffic, including across Payran to Magnolia and down Payran. I think it would be better to allow this space for future bike use rather than squeezing in 4 parking spaces. The SMART trail is in close proximity, and there's going to be future cyclists. That's the goal. Mentioned tonight was general use of the on-site parking is intentional. So rather than creating parking on what is now a public street, they could include eliminating the 4 spots on the street. I see I've run out of time. I think it's a good project otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, for your comments. Up next is Tom and Judith Wilging, followed by Kate Greenspan. Tom and Judith, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourselves.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
My name is Tom Wilging, and my wife Judith Wilging is with me. We live in Oakland, California. We've known Matthew Ridgway for more than 50 years, and he's not much older than that. Matthew's parents and brother and our family of 4 co-owned a duplex before the concept of co-housing became popular. Our families continue to work and play together as a community, even though we now live in separate dwellings. Tonight, Judith and I want to say several things about Matthew and Dawn's plans for Co-op 890, which is before the commission for approval. 1, Matthew and Dawn will be great neighbors. They will bring a spirit that will undoubtedly serve and enhance your community. 2, Matthew will do everything he has promised in his application, and probably a lot more. He has always acted that way in the 50 years we've known him. And 3, their co-housing plan will introduce additional housing at a time when it is sorely needed. The project will be ecologically sustainable, accessible to the handicapped, and as affordable as current regulations allow. Please approve Matthew and Dawn's proposal for Co-op 890. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tom, for your comments. Up next is Kate Greenspan, followed by Taryn Obaid. Kate, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I live right down the street and walk this block nearly every day. And I just wanted to show my support for the concept and the vision of this project. I'm really excited about the prospect of cooperative living projects in Petaluma, and I'd love to see more of these development styles go in, especially in my neighborhood. I'm just really excited that this project potentially will be happening right down the street. This area that 890 would go in is so underutilized and often feels really unsafe. The unoccupied spaces currently attract some illegal activities. Yesterday, for example, I walked by and saw some major drug use happening at this exact location. So I would love to see productive use of this space and infill. I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to echo some of the comments that have already been made about the proposed on-street parking. Payran through Gray Lawn and Roca is already a really dangerous stretch for pedestrians and cyclists. Walking there with a stroller or wheelchair, this block is already challenging enough. So I'm really a little bit concerned about, this space shrinking even more. Concerns have been brought up about cars pulling in and out. It's already kind of a gauntlet to get through this area, and that is currently the last little stretch of safe sidewalk space. So if it shrinks down and disappears, I'm a little concerned about walking there each day. I might have to change my route. And I know that other neighbors share this concern. So I hope that those issues can be addressed. And it sounds like the tree issues that have already been brought up across the street is a concrete and asphalt desert. So I would love to see the tree canopy preserved where it can be preserved. But overall, I would really love to welcome this project to the neighborhood. The applicant seems like he would be a great neighbor, and I really applaud him for taking this project on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comment, Kate. Up next is Taryn Obaid, followed by Veronica Olson. Taryn, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute.
Hi, my husband's ceding his time.
Thank you. Would you mind if he states his name for the record as well?
Hi, good evening. My name is Ahmed Obaid, and I'd like to cede my time to Taryn Obaid. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn. You have 6 minutes.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate this development. I like the way it looks. We live just 2 blocks away, and I have some confusion, some questions, and some concerns, please. I'm a marketer. I get the strong marketing story that all of the family members will live here, even in their small individual 350 square feet units, and that all your friends who are calling in tonight want to come live here as well. But then I'm confused because the owners state that there's no plans for family. So I'm confused whether that's just marketing. And really my confusion or my concern is because we need so much housing, right? So I want to know, is this guaranteed owner occupied, or is it just an ownership structure that allows for distribution of rental income stream? We know how corporations can be structured in various ways. I just hope that we won't have empty units that will be turned into Airbnb, or an entirely different business model will show up, such as a hotel or a homeless shelter even, right? That seems important to know, especially because this area has emerged as a ghetto. There are 5 low-income complexes within 1 block radius, and economically we need diversity. It's particularly important. Businesses here struggle, and sadly we lost a cafe even before COVID. So really they struggle to survive. I will say my big concern is safe streets. There are 30,000 cars per day here according to the traffic study for our entire city. We need safety for our school kids. St. Vincent is just 2 blocks away and they walk and bike here all the time. It's a significant industrial use intersection. There are 3 industrial businesses here. The granary silo or elevator, I should say, on the corner, Shell gas station on the corner, Lucky department or Lucky grocery store. Many double tanker semis go through here all day long. I am troubled that there's no mention in the staff report of Bike and Ped commissioner comments on West Payran, the 30 yards of red curb there being magically removed because they're no longer needed. Those commissioner comments weren't included in the staff report, and thank you to the Commissioner Wilkinson for being on the call tonight to reiterate his concerns. Not a good idea to allow parallel parking there. Imagine you're making a left-hand turn from Petaluma Boulevard eastbound onto West Payran, and you're completing your turn, and whoops, the person in front of you stops. They want to back up. They want to angle in. They want to do it again. They want to try to get in that parallel space. How many rear ends do you think we're going to end up with? It appears that staff has had no awareness that the West Payran is a curb. And I don't like the lack of that evidence. I think that's dangerous. I'm especially troubled by the narrowing of the street to 12 feet. Bike lanes are typically about 4 feet, right? 4 feet from the curb. Semis are 8.5 feet wide. 4 feet plus 8 feet is 12.5 feet. The math doesn't work. How can you have a 12-foot wide street when you're going to have over 12 feet of usage? This is dangerous. There is no margin of error. And if you add parallel parking on top of it, and all the angling in and the stopping and the opening doors, this is not going to be good for school kids or anybody there. Given that there are industrial semis, narrowing the street is not good. The bulb out to decrease crosswalk distance. I don't get that. That seems a suboptimum sort of a trade-off because it put cars and bikers in harm's way. It squeezes them when semis are turning onto West Payran here. That's not the right solution. Speeding at this intersection is not the problem. So narrowing is not the right solution. It's inconsistent with our rationale. We widened the street downtown on our road diet on Petaluma Boulevard because there were semis jumping the curb when they were making right-hand turns onto Western Avenue. Have we forgotten that? Why are we doing the exact opposite here and putting people in harm's way? I'm concerned we didn't get this right. I think that the car share idea is great. Let's go for that. Let's give this developer a concession to let him to have less parking there. Let's let him go up one more level so that he can put parking underneath and then surround that parking on the ground floor with like a metal lattice that then has vines growing up. How nice would that be for carbon emissions processing? Who's going to take on the risk of reducing this road here and having semis jumping the curb, running over pedestrians, running into bicyclists that are just squeezing by? This is too small. Who's going to take on the liability? Is it city staff? Is it city staff consultants? Is it the developer? Or is it us taxpayers? Money aside, I don't want to see anybody hurt. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Taryn. Up next is Veronica Olson, followed by Beverly Alexander. Veronica, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for listening. I just would like to say that I'm in support of this project spirit. I think the vision that these individuals have had is wonderful, and I appreciate the fact that we are going to have a form of a co-op. It's going to be an example that we can use throughout the city. And I also think that some of the design components and the fact that they've been thoughtful of the design is great. I think the area being activated and having place for local business is also great. I do share some of the concerns that the other speakers have on that, the parking, the 4 spots, and looking at this project holistically and the other things that are going to happen in the area in the future, including bike infrastructure and where we want to go as a city, as a bike and pedestrian city, and the goals and the vision that we have in our new general plan. So I don't have the solutions, and I'm not haven't thought through some ideas, but I want to say that I am in support of this type of project, and I appreciate all the efforts that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Veronica. Up next is Beverly Alexander, followed by Christine Kiesling. Beverly, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute.
Good evening. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a lot that's new to say. I am concerned about having the parking on West Payran. I think that's a really dangerous idea. And it's been explained as to why it's dangerous. And I was thinking, though, I really appreciate the co-op idea and the sense of community that's been being spoken of. And in that case, so many cars might not even be needed. The cars could be shared. So that's another way to look at it, and would, of course, be lots less expensive than putting another story on the building and putting parking below. So I think that's something to consider. I don't remember the trees there, so I'm going to say that they should be saved if possible, but I also like the idea of having natives, but it takes a long time for a tree to grow. So that really needs to be considered. I like that the paved area in back is going to be permeable. That's really great. That's really important. I like the raised beds on the roof. And I like the fact that the units are smaller. We Americans have gotten used to living in such large places, and I don't think we need all that space. So I think this is going to be an example for the future. And I really hope that the co-op succeeds. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for your comments, Beverly. Up next is Christine Kiesling. Christine, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Christine Kiesling. I know Matt Ridgway and Dawn, but I am also a colleague or a fellow professional. I am a cost estimator, but I am educated in architecture. I was born and raised in Sonoma County, so I'm familiar with Petaluma, but I am very interested in this project because studying architecture, I was very excited about co-housing and cooperative housing and multi-generational housing. And listening to all of the concerns tonight, I understand them, but it's interesting because from a design standpoint, I think it's a very exciting project. But now that I am specifically working in the field of feasibility, I know that underground parking or taking any of the parking off surface is not feasible for this project to be affordable. And I also think, you know, I live in Oakland now, and Oakland and other urban areas have taken street parking and made it flex parking or parklets. So that could be a thought for the city. If the parking is unappealing, you could make it a parklet for one of the commercial spaces. But really, I just think it's a great project. As someone from Sonoma County, someone who would love to think about moving back to the area and downsizing, I think co-housing and multi-generational housing is a really exciting prospect for America and certainly for Petaluma and for anyone here that doesn't just want to be pigeonholed into communities for a certain age group. I also ride a bike, so I don't feel like the bike lane issue is a real big deal. Having listened to the whole hearing this evening, I think it's, having been around Petaluma, it's feels very safe and you can navigate through it. So I just support the project. As a friend, as a colleague, as a professional who doesn't even know Matt or does know Matt, I wish it success and I hope you support it.
Thank you, Christine, for your comment. And I'm not seeing any additional hands raised from our attendees joining us tonight. I will stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Vice Chair Bauer.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Moderator Roberts. And we will now close public comment, and I will move on to asking our commissioners for their comments on the project or any additional questions that they may have. Oh, Commissioner Hooper.
Thank you. Still very much like this project. I would like to just say, because that was an interesting array of public comments, Matt seems great just based on all the public comments we've received so far. I just want to say for any future applicants who may be on this though, we don't actually make decisions based on how great the applicant is. So I just is appreciated, but it's you know, to a certain point. I still really love this project, really want to support it. Think this kind of co-op housing is perfect, a perfect model for the kind of density housing we'll need going forward. And for the most part, I'm on board with it. There's one specific tweak I really want to look for, and I want to see it as a condition for us approving the mitigation of the parking requirements, which is, I'm sorry, I agree with Jerry. I want to see the bulb out removed. I don't want on-street parking. We have brought this up over multiple points before public comment. Public comment has brought it up at several points. I think Jerry is right. I think it's problematic for that area. And I think it's gonna be problematic in a few years when we're really looking for an extended bike lane or along that path that will ideally connect to the future smart path. So I support the project. I support I support the mitigations that the applicant's requesting. My issues though is in order to allow for the reduced requirements on parking, which I'm all in favor of in the first place, I really want to see the bulb out removed. I don't want to see on-street parking. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Hooper. Commissioner Whiston.
Thanks, Vice Chair, and appreciate the applicant work that the staff did in preparing presentation today. I'd like to offer the few comments, a few in support and also a few suggestions. First of all, I really like the architecture. The 3 stories, I think, is really important to add density to that area of the city. It's a creative, attractive appearance as well, when compared to some of the other kind of more staid projects that we see come before us. So I really compliment the applicant and their architect on the work they did there. I also like the street-facing balconies and also the rear balconies to promote some interaction between the property itself and the community around it. I also like the project for purposes of the where it's located and how it works with the neighborhood, the infill nature of it. Like I said, the density, the walkability, and transit orientation. I think those are all commendable as well. Like others have said, I'm really intrigued by the cooperative housing concept. I think that I would support it for no other reason than just to see that as a proof of concept. It may encourage other developers and other private entities like yourselves to do the same and see that it can be successful, and use it as a precedent for other developments in the city. I also want to acknowledge the transparency aspect that was mentioned by the planner initially, of creating the website as a way of being able to share the concepts and share some of the elements of the project with the general public. A lot has been made of the bulb out in the parking. My thoughts are certainly I drive down there a lot, and I have biked down there up and down Petaluma Boulevard quite a bit. So I do recognize it's a busy part of town, it's a busy intersection. But I'm also intrigued by the comments earlier that the bulb out would actually promote a safer pedestrian access and utilization of that intersection, in that it would slow traffic. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. I'd like to see planning staff work with the applicant and the rest of the professional staff in the city to validate that. But I do think that those are two potentially positive outcomes of that bulb out there. With regard to the on-street parking, I live in a very similar circumstance up in Petaluma Boulevard South, and basically has the exact same construct where there are 4 or 5 parallel parking spaces. There's a class 2 parking lane, and then there's actually two lanes of traffic coming down up, approaching Mountain View there. And I mean, the traffic there is the speeds there are quite fast, much faster than what we're talking about at this intersection. I again drive, bike, and walk there multiple times a day, and I have never observed a problem with the interaction between the parking there, the biking, and traffic coming off that very busy stretch there. So I'm not as concerned about the parking there. I would like to see some potential uses there for pickup and drop off instead of or in addition to parking, whether that's ride sharing, carpooling, anything that supports the concept of an alternative mode of transportation, as opposed to the residents there having a second car and any additional parking there. I do think we have to recognize that some level of on-street parking, it doesn't have to be an overabundance, but some level of on-street parking is a trade-off to support the mixed use of that facility. I mean, you can't have mixed use, especially incorporating some commercial element without some level of parking there. And again, it doesn't have to be a gigantic parking lot. But I do think that we do need some parking there to support the mixed use nature of it. In terms of the suggestion category, recognize Councilman McDonald's comment about, kind of the unused nature of that bulb out. Suggest that maybe some type of public art there, public sculpture might be a good addition to activate that area, and make it a little bit more of a community area. I'd also, as many other people have said, I took a pretty long review of the landscape plan and the tree evaluation. I would like to encourage the applicant to preserve as many of the moderate condition trees as possible for all of the reasons stated. We need to keep canopy and add canopy, and also, preserve habitat and add habitat for, especially not that part of the city. So I think those are all my comments, but generally supportive of the project, and like to see it go forward.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Westman. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I think the applicant's got a great project here. It's the kind of thing that Petaluma needs for different housing and to have mixed transit-oriented housing. I think it's creative. It's a better land use for housing, and just the lower square foot per unit, the lower cost. It's just a better use of land. And being as how there's a market there, it's sort of the 15 minutes thing we've been talking about, where you're able to, it helps walkability because you're near amenities. Both of those restaurants I'm a fan of, from the Three Cooks days all the way to present, and Ambrosia, new favorite. And I love Christopher's point from the public there, that this ownership, co-housing, keeps wealth in the city and not in some private equity firm's hands. So I'm a big supporter of that concept too. Architecture, I love the commons. I love the courtyard. I love the elevator. We had debate whether 3-story buildings needed elevators and visitability issues we had. And so the elevator is a big plus for me. Architecture overall, I'm supportive of. And, we rarely get mixed use, legit mixed use proposals. This is legit mixed use. So that's a good positive. I'm okay with the height variance, the parking. We'll come back to parking, I guess, with density bonus and the CEQA adequacy that were all mentioned as topics for findings. I'm concerned that the neighbors and shop owners have not been adequately informed. I hear what that shop owner is saying, and I think the outreach needs to continue. And did note that right there at that crossing that we're all talking about at Payran, the lanes are, I think, 11 feet and a 6-foot bike. Yeah. So it's 17 feet of area, and that, call it a throat between the ADA ramp and the double yellows that are going to be placing the concrete island out there. I love that the bulb out provides a shortened crossing distance, making walkability safer, and in both directions, crossing the boulevard and crossing Payran, both of those benefit from having that. And when we get down to requested conditions, if we get the bike boxes painted green in that throat area right there where the ADA ramp starts, and then that'll show clearly the space that's for vehicles and spaces for bike lanes. I wish we could get a 4, but getting a 2 here is striped on both sides, and that'll be another condition, is really essential. I live in this area, and I and have since 1989, and bike through the intersection several times a week in many directions. My coming off Magnolia, going north on the boulevard, coming into town on the boulevard and turning right on Magnolia, as well as going from Magnolia through on to Payran on my bike. And so I'm very familiar with this. When I don't do much is Petaluma Boulevard. I know we call it a bike route, but that's really a stretch. It's brutal. It's a class 3/4. That means you need to get out and to take a lane, and you're taking a lane in heavy traffic. I did hear staff say they had a plan for a concept or a hope for bike improvements on Petaluma Boulevard in that stretch. I'd love to hear it because that's I ride a lot of places, and that's one I try to never ride. I recognize the Petaluma wheelmen use it as their route out of town, but they take the lane and have that kind of confidence in their ridership. But this is why I'm putting so much faith in SMART's path completion, and why I'm asking people to show up and talk to SMART at tomorrow's listening session that SMART's doing. I hope that the SMART path completes before this project, and residents can zip around the back, be on the path right behind there, and straight into downtown on the SMART path. I think as we commit to active transportation, we need to make SMART do their piece and get that completed. I am in regards to conditions for approval. I am interested in adding something about limiting the tree removal, encouraging gray water irrigation of trees, and thinking about that sidewalk expanse. I appreciate Commissioner Rick's feedback on that. I think maybe even a tile mosaic project into the corner there. It's something flush rather than obstructive. So I'd like to try and get that into conditions. And I do want to see that the sidewalk width on Payran be minimum 5 feet. And it doesn't hurt for us to put it in a condition. I think the walking on Payran with the new sidewalks will be better than now. I heard from the public, they're concerned about walking there now. I think the project will make the walking much better. Let's see, I want the green boxes in a condition, and then just assuring left and right striping on a bike, on the bike lane that's proposed, is both left and right striping getting done. Regarding Commissioners Hooper's comment on eliminating the parking, I have a question for staff. If we eliminate, can we eliminate that parking and approve the project to go forward? Is there a way we can waive the requirement for that project or parking? And then probably there's a corollary to the applicant. Can he still, is he still find the project viable without those available parking spaces? So staff, can we do that and recommend the project?
I'm happy to respond to that comment. The findings presented to the Planning Commission provide no connection between the proposed parking in the right-of-way and project approval. There was no trade-off or exchange or consideration whatsoever in the findings for the on-street parking spaces. Okay, so the Planning Commission could say no on-street parking, and the findings and conditions, aside from adding something to say no on-street parking, would stay as they are.
And can I ask the applicant the impact? I hate to throw you right there in front of the microphone, but if we say that that stays red zone.
No, it's a fair question. I mean, obviously this question has been present for a while. So we've given it some thought. We'll build the project with or without the bulb, with or without the parking. I will say that I don't understand the concern about the parking. If you make a list of all of your favorite cities to visit and then go to ask their city traffic engineers about this bulb and about this parking, there is so much evidence that this is going to be a safety improvement for people who are traveling. It'll make the sidewalk much more comfortable because you'll have buffer. I'm personally working on Vision Zero projects in Kissimmee, Florida, in Denton, Texas, in El Paso, Texas. I'm doing a streetscape project in Bladensburg Road in New York City, in Washington, D.C. This is standard fare. This is sort of the minimum set of requirements that are required of new urban infill development. So I really don't understand the concern about this. And I would just recommend that you get some other advice. Your own city staff backs the bulb and the parking, but if you don't believe your own city staff, I would suggest you ask the Portland traffic engineer, ask the Oakland traffic engineer, ask the San Francisco traffic engineer, ask the cities that you really like with how they do design, what they think about this.
Okay, thanks. That helps clarify this quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of the sidewalk improvements and the shortening the crossing distance and that kind of thing, and the bike lane being green boxed. And so, I'm, my support of the project includes doing all that sidewalk and improvement work. It's just fundamental to me. And I'm very excited to see us go forward. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember McDonald. Commissioner Ryder?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I too love the concept. I'm a big fan of co-housing and cooperative housing, having been a participant of it and actually a tenant of it for a very long time as a commercial business. So really love cooperative housing with mixed use. I think it's a really fantastic opportunity. And I completely agree with the comments of my fellow commissioners around this is a great location for it, and it's timely for what we need in town here. Kind of wish there were more units, honestly, but that's not the discussion before us. The fact that it's mixed use, has dynamic storefronts, even on this busy road, but makes that busy road more accessible through the widening of the sidewalks in that area and the softening of vegetation buffers and everything, all looks really lovely. I do have some concerns about a couple specific issues. The parking thing is an interesting one, and I am just trying to envision it. And I too think that it's just a challenging corridor to envision what it will look like, because I expect so much redevelopment to happen in that space. So what do we want to create there is sort of where my mindset is going, is what will it be eventually, but also how do we make it safe in the interim? I'm a little bit torn about that, but my more specific comments around concerns, I'm a little concerned about how much unshaded glazing is on the western facade, frankly. So that's one thing to take into consideration. One of the public commenters noted some permeable paving that I didn't note in the civil plan. So that's something that I hope it's there and hope it's being considered, but I didn't notice it in there. So things of that nature are certainly considerations as you move forward into more specifics of the design. But thank you for bringing this to us. I'll just say, thank you for having the vision that clearly we're also excited about for having cooperative housing and community.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryder. Commissioner Hooper?
Just on the bulb out and specifically on the street parking on West Payran. I also am a huge supporter of new urbanism, and I love bulb outs. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities in Petaluma where we should have had them and we don't. A lot of projects in PBAC that we've tried to advocate for them and haven't gotten them. The thing is, support by comparison to other cities isn't doctrine, and we have to look at specific conditions to the site, and a good chunk of us have lived in that area and seen what does or doesn't happen, and a lot of our staff haven't. And also a lot of them are contracts, so it's a little bit different than other cities. We also have to look at the long-term desires we have for that site. I think this will in the long run get in the way of a much better bike path we could have, especially aligning with SMART. And I'm sorry, but it's a little ridiculous to me to suggest that all mixed use requires that on-site parking when there is a giant Lucky's parking lot across the street that is almost never full. I know we're not supposed to bank on this. I know we're not supposed to plan for this, but I'm just saying it's almost never full. It's right across the street. And we need to be frank about our city's goals. We just had a joint council planning session on our parking standards and our parking minimums and how we want to reduce our reliance on parking. We do that project by project. And if we can't do that here in a street that is so clearly a conflict zone, then we should frankly give up on the goal now. We're never going to do it. It's just going to be too hard for us if we can't just expand the sidewalk, make it a little better, acknowledge that it's a hard turn, and we can put our bulb out dreams in locations that are a little more appropriate to Petaluma. I love bulb outs. It doesn't mean they go in every single corner. This is not a good site for a bulb out. It's why I would very strongly be pushing to have a condition for the reduced parking come with the removal of the bulb out, removal of street parking, but also clearly supporting Councilmember McDonald's point of at least expanding and improving the sidewalk that's there. Well, let's keep it red striped. It's absurd to add more parking density to this location. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hooper. I guess I'll go now. I am a little bit torn about the bulb out, but I trust our city engineers, and I also have lived in this neighborhood for a very long time, and there's a lot of kids and elderly people and people in wheelchairs, and I've seen people having to rush across the road to barely make it sometimes. So I kind of think that we're kind of have one safety issue on one end and another safety issue on the other end, and we can't have both. And I think having wider sidewalk here is, to me, going to be better for the community overall and going to make it safer for children, people with dogs, elderly, people with wheelchairs. And, you know, I do think it is going to be better in the long run for the community to have the bulb out. So I think I'm in support of the bulb out. And because we're going to have the bulb out, you know, there is that area for parking, which probably, you know, will be needed for whatever on-site commercial is going to be there. So I think I'm content with going with what the city engineers already studied, and I trust that if they learn something different going forward, that they'll have to revise the project accordingly. So I think I'm in support of keeping the bulb out. I also heard that there are other commissioners, I think, that were in support of keeping the trees that were existing, and I think we may have critical mass for that. So we may be able to add a condition of approval to keep the trees. But we could talk about that, and I think there were at least 3 of us that said we would like to. We would support keeping the existing trees there and finding a way to do that. Also, Councilmember McDonald had some other really good possible conditions of approval, which was having some sort of like the flush sidewalk art, which I would definitely support too, since, you know, if we are going to keep the bulb out, I'd like to have it at least be more of an area of interest instead of just this big concrete area. I'd also want to make sure we could have a 5-foot minimum sidewalk, like that was mentioned before, and then the double striping for the bike lane too, and the green boxes. So I don't know if other commissioners are in support of having those conditions of approval too, but those are the ones that I support. I know we have support from Commissioner McDonald, and I think Commissioner Wisman had support of keeping the site trees. So, you know, raise your hand if you want to join us in making some of those also conditions of approval. Commissioner Ryder?
I have a question. If we are to widen the sidewalk on Pedestrian, is there still room for all the things you want to do? I guess that's a question for the city engineer.
I think part of the answer goes back to the applicant. I think it depends on their site layout. I mean, if you widen the sidewalk, you're going to lose some of the landscape strip. So landscape strip is used for fire retention. So it's something that they're going to chase. But I think that if it obviously, our standards do show 5 foot for that type of roadway. So they're going to need to make that work. However they do, if it's adjusting the landscape strip or moving the bioretention, it's just a piece they need to do.
Or potentially moving the street. Is that an option or no?
Yeah, and that's another option. I mean, you could, if you wanted to remove parking, which a lot of people seem to be in favor of, you could push it out a little bit to get that necessary room that you would need.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wisman?
Yeah, I just want to add a comment and clarify the point about the tree removal or preservation. I'd modify a little bit, Vice Chair, what you're suggesting, in that I was advocating preserving the trees that were in moderate condition, and leaving open the possibility of removing the ones that are in poor condition, or were in otherwise degraded state, and also if it the ones that wouldn't otherwise disrupt the constructability of the plan as it's laid out. I didn't want to overcomplicate it, but I just wanted to see the best efforts used to preserve as many moderate condition trees as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryder?
Yeah, just to build on the tree conversation briefly, I had in my notes that specifically the trees called out as 3 and 11, which are both in moderate condition and in locations where trees will be proposed to be replaced. That perhaps we put the condition to specify those 2 trees be saved, and then whatever other moderate trees can be at some level of design discretion.
That's a good idea. Is there support for that from other commissioners? I support that.
And then if I may, Vice Chair, just to, I would be supportive of a condition that expands the sidewalk while keeping bioretention and removing the street parking.
Okay. Are there any other commissioners that support that idea? Councilmember McDonald?
Well, I was going to suggest at some point we ask staff how the actual wording could lay out, and invite them in to synthesize. Because like you, I'm hearing that it's a split, and perhaps the parking is still an option on the table, and so and I looking at the drawings, I'm pretty sure that they can moderate their they can succeed at their stormwater detention without and widen without there being any nexus to the parking issue. So I think the condition should say, and then I defer to staff. The staff says that the sidewalk has to be 5 feet already, and that's a city requirement. Then that's just an error on the plans that staff will catch, and the condition's probably not required. But I appreciate your supporting the green box and left-right lines on a bike lane. Thanks.
Does the applicant, Matt, do you have a response? You're muted. Matthew, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, we have headphones dying here. If we move the curb line out, it's a dramatic increase in the expense of the streetscape improvements. So we are trying to build an affordable by design housing project, and every time we add additional expenses, it makes that more and more difficult. I will also add that if the concern is that narrowing the travel lanes on Payran is an unsafe condition, then narrowing him to widen the sidewalk is the same unsafe condition as narrowing to put on street parking. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, at least we get some benefit out of having on-street parking if we pay for all those streets at the corner bulb and the like. Moving the sidewalk out into the street, moving the curb lines, the curb and gutter for the entire length of our frontage adds significantly to the cost of our projects with no real benefit in terms of access to parking. So maybe there's a compromise where you allow it to look like parking at the moment. You do a trial on whether the parking actually causes any problem, and if it does, then you stripe it out or otherwise obstruct it with planter boxes or something else so it can't be used as parking if there's a problem. I have a prediction that it will not be.
I don't know if people were insinuating that the sidewalk go into the street, really more that I think it goes the other way into the planter boxes or something like that. But I don't think this is a problem because I think it has to be 5 feet, right? The
Yes.
Sidewalk. So I think it was intended to be that the whole time.
What I heard people saying is they would like to see the sidewalk widen beyond that.
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
that 5 foot was what was intended and what everybody wants. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, well, I don't know, but I think I'm only hearing one agreed upon condition of approval from everybody, from a majority, but we can talk about the parking a little bit. One is the trees, keeping the 2 trees that Commissioner Ryder recommended for sure, and hopefully maybe evaluating the others to see if they are in condition to be kept too. That one seemed like it had support from the majority of the commission. And then I'll let Commissioner Hooper, do you want to talk about the parking concern?
Well, I was trying to say, we've now flowed a bit into different conditions here. Could we just straw poll all of them from the commission so we can be real clear about what's going to go with this and what won't?
Yeah, Olivia, do you want to do that? Okay.
Sure. So I've been noting down the conditions as they have come up, and I will run through those. I'm happy to offer some draft language if we get to that point. The trees one is about working with the applicant to retain as many trees as possible, taking into consideration tree health, suitability for preservation, and specifically looking at preserving the moderate trees number 3 and number 11. And we can flesh that language out, but that's sort of where the working draft is.
Yes.
Okay, consensus on that one I'm seeing. I also have noted that as part of the improvement plan, the bike lane shall be on both sides of the bike lane. And I'm not quite sure the best way to say that, but something to that effect, indicating that there would be 2 bike lanes, and also with consideration of green painting at the city engineer's discretion, something like that.
I think that's striping both sides of the lane. It's not 2 lanes. It's a stripe both sides of the lane shown.
Of the bike lane, yeah. Okay. Painting. And those are things that, again, will be tied to the improvement plan. I think on the 5, we don't need a condition on the 5 feet sidewalk because that is the standard. So I don't have that as a specific thing. And I do think we need to talk a little bit more about where folks are landing with retaining or removing the parking, because I am hearing a bit of a mix there. So I think the issue at hand is keeping that street parking as shown and as proposed, or removing it, or what's on the table.
Yeah, I think you need to ask us.
Yeah, could you ask us if we're in favor of removing it or not?
Okay, so is there support for the project as proposed to retain the street parking, to have the street parking be part of this project?
I support that.
Okay, so that seems like it's a split one.
With the condition that if there are problems in the future, that we can remove that. Make it a pocket park or something like that. I don't know if we should write that in, but I would hope that the city, if there were problems in the future, would make efforts to remove the threat.
Okay, so that is probably something that I don't know if it helps to clarify, or if this is already clear, that parking is not tied to this project. So that is public street parking. That is not a requirement of this project. That is not tied to the entitlements. That is what Greg was saying before. So I just want to make sure that's crystal clear to this commission. Okay.
Yeah, would that be, I do have a question about that. Is that like 2-hour zone like the rest of the city, or would that be somebody could just park in it 24/7?
That's a good question. Jeff, do you know what the standard would be at that parking location on the boulevard?
I think we can stripe it or sign it however we see fit. I mean, it seems like for the area that it's in, that 2 hours would probably be applicable.
Yeah. I think I don't want it to be 24/7, you know, I don't want, yeah. Unrestricted use.
Okay. So I am hearing the condition would be, well, if it's, I guess the condition would just be for the city engineer to continue monitoring that location, and if there are conflicts to revise the parking with a alternative option, which could be a parklet or planter boxes or some other appropriate design.
Councilmember McDonald?
Yeah, I think I'd be happy not trying to craft anything regarding that. I think, you know, I think that is per plan, per staff's recommendation, and essentially staff design of the streetscape. And so I think we're working too hard to craft something.
Yeah,
one thing
I
that
don't,
was
I don't
missing.
think we need that either.
One thing that was sort of came up that was missing is there's no time stipulation on the parking now. Do we want a condition about time stipulation? And I could go either way on that one.
And remember, it is public right of way. So city has full discretion of what we do within our right of way.
Commissioner Wisman?
Yeah, I just want to fully understand if this is not a condition of approval for this project, I guess I want to ask what seems like an obvious question. Why are we talking about it right now as a condition of approval then? It sounds like it's a separate consideration that is a matter before staff. And I mean, we shouldn't be hijacking this project in order to achieve or oppose that parking. But if I've misstated that, you know, please staff correct me or otherwise.
I think that's where we're headed here, Commissioner, given the discussion that is currently happening and where we've come feels like full circle. And I think that that is a totally apt comment, which is that this is exactly what the city engineer and public works team does, is monitor our public streets and right of way and makes adjustments as needed based on conditions at the time. So I agree. I think that at this point, we are not looking at adding a condition from what I'm hearing related to the parking, and that just stand as proposed as part of the project.
Yeah, Commissioner Hooper?
Just to be clear, the street parking popped up in the first time when it was presented to PBAC. Whether it's actually part of this project or not, it's been discussed as necessary because of the mixed use nature of the project. It's been added as part of a bulb out design that again paired with the project, and it was brought forward to us as paired with the project. I understand that it's not actually a condition because it's something the city staff would want to provide alongside the project. That's why I requested we condition this, because adding street parking in this spot is a horrible misuse of our resources and misaligns with our goals. It's also why, by the way, I would have liked if you had actually asked us how many people supported removing the parking rather than showing how many people supported the project as is. I understand this is not a condition to the project, but it's been entirely presented as being in parallel and part of the project.
Okay, let me ask it again. How many folks are supportive of removing the parking from the project? Okay, thank you. I think that provides the clarity we need to not further discuss this as a condition. There's less than a majority support for that. The final, thank you guys. The final condition that I have noted down is about some kind of enhanced treatment to the bulb out to bring some interest, perhaps through a flush sidewalk art or some other opportunity that would be appropriate there. And do we have commissioners that are interested in seeing that added? Okay, I'm seeing that as a majority. Okay, so the list of conditions that I have at time are about the trees, and I provided some language, and I'll just run through that again. It's specific to tree number 3 and 11, and about retaining as many moderate trees as possible. There is a condition being added to provide some additional interest to the bulb out, perhaps through the addition of a flush sidewalk art or other appropriate treatment there. And there is a condition being added to clarify that as part of the public improvement plan, the bike lane shall be striped on both sides and green painting installed at appropriate segments at the city engineer's discretion. And those are the conditions that I have noted based on the commissioner's discussion this evening, and happy to circle back on any of those as needed.
Thank you, Olivia. I want to get back to Commissioner Ryder. She's had her hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify really the scope of the street improvements that are within the jurisdiction of this conversation, because it's just not clear to me yet. So we're talking about conditioning the bike lane portion, but not the parking, and the bulb out falls where in that discussion? Is that something we should be talking about or not? I guess I'm not super clear on just the scope.
Okay, well, let me ask, perhaps prompted by what Commissioner Hooper said before, is there support of the commission to remove the bulb out? Okay, so I'm not seeing that that has a majority support. So as the project currently is proposed, the bulb out and the parking are part of the public realm, part of the public improvement plan. And those things would be in concert with the city engineer through that process. And the conditions would be added to clarify that the improvement plan would have that the bike striping on both sides, as we've been discussing, and the green paint. And so those are the conditions that would be added. The project already includes those elements, so there's no other changes to conditions in that regard. Commissioner Ryder, I hope that clarifies your point.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryder, and thank you, Olivia. I didn't get a chance before to just comment on the project. Yeah, like I was mentioning, I do live in the area, and this corner has kind of been abandoned for a while, and even before that it even felt abandoned. So I'm really excited to see this going here. This is the type of project we often long for. We want, like, you know, ground floor commercial with smaller units above and low income, and you know, this is a cool, groovy, hip project, and it's going to really, you know, bring this side of town kind of like into the mix. I do hope it does become like the start of the other side of the downtown, and create a thoroughfare that can go from this side all the way to the downtown area. So I'm very excited about this. I love a lot of the components of this, the cooperative housing, the, you know, proximity to public transit, the proximity to services and stores. I think it's a great project, and I'm very excited to see it happen right in my own neighborhood, actually. And I think it's really going to be wonderful. So with that, I see that our assistant attorney Dylan Brady has his hand up. Yes, Dylan?
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair. I was just going through the current conditions approval to see if there was any conflicts, and the only one I saw, and I can pull this up to the screen right now, that we might need to adjust is condition 24 regarding the planting of 7 trees. We might have to adjust that to massage it with the new condition about saving trees. Or should we just allow staff, I think the direction is pretty clear, so maybe we can figure that out later, I guess, with your direction.
I do think we probably need to clarify or soften the language here, because the 7 trees is about removing, if all of those street trees were to be removed, then this number would need to be replanted. So if fewer are removed, then fewer would need to be replanted. I suppose we could say 5 to 7. Although I'm a little bit out of my Greg, do you have the tree replacement stuff on the tip of your fingers? I'm thinking out loud here. If we say 5 to 7, then that still provides the range. For example, if they're not able to save any of those moderate trees, then the 7 would still be good. If they can save 2 of them, then the 5 would be good. But our tree replacement is based, is it just 2 to 1?
May I suggest
anyway.
up
So
to
I could use
7?
that.
Olivia, may I suggest that the language up to 7 trees?
Thank you, Councilmember McDonald. That will take care of that on that condition.
And I also want to say too, I was looking at the conditions regarding the public art, and condition number 9 does require them to either install public art or pay that public art in lieu fee. I don't know, Greg, do you know, or the applicant, or have they reached kind of a decision on where they're going with that?
They have not, and we haven't confirmed yet the applicability of the arts ordinance. If the construction costs exceed the threshold, that's yet to be determined, but that's something that's on the table for sure. Since I have the virtual mic, can I jump in and offer a couple of responses to one of the neighborhood comments and a condition of approval that staff believes needs to be added at the discretion of the vice chair?
Sure, go ahead.
If I may. One of the early speakers was concerned about construction impacts on his business, traffic, use of the driveways, parking spaces, dust, noise, etc. Staff neglected to, or should have added a traffic control plan, a condition of approval, and I have one. I can show it on the screen, or you can just trust that we'll use sort of the standard language about how the site and the adjacent right-of-way is used during construction. Also, just to highlight for the neighbor's interest, there's standard conditions that deal with dust, noise, and other sort of construction-related impacts, just as a standard operating procedure that are already as conditions of approval, and they should be adequate to address the neighbor's concerns about traffic, aside from the one that we missed about traffic control plans.
Can we add the traffic control plan as an additional condition of approval?
Yes.
Is there other commissioner support for that? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I did want to follow up with that and say that I know it is a small area, and I know that market is pretty busy, and I appreciate the during the construction that they keep in mind the fellow business owners, including the market and Ambrosian. Please be mindful of people coming and going with that, and noise, and just being the start of good neighbors there. I know you'll want to, and I appreciate you continuing to start a good relationship with them. So
yeah, and if I may, without the prior approval and consent of the adjoining property owner, this project would not be able to use that site for storage or staging anyway. So there would be a conversation to be had at that point if the adjoining neighbor was interested in that.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other commissioner comments right now? If not, then I think we could get a motion to approve the SPAR and the residential density bonus. And with the conditions of approval, which I have down as adding a traffic control plan, 2 striping for the bike lane, the sidewalk art, and keeping the 2 trees or whatever trees are feasible to keep are the wording that Olivia said. So I'll need a motion to approve those.
Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Wissman, thank you. And then can I get a second, please? Okay. Councilmember McDowell?
Yes, I'll make the second.
Okay, then I can get a second, and then we'll need a roll call vote, Olivia? Or Miss Ellis?
Okay. Potter, recused. Bauer,
Yes.
Hooper,
Commissioner Hooper, I don't think we heard you.
Hooper,
Yes.
Ryder,
Yes.
Wissman,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
and 1 vacant seat.
Great, thank you. Looks like that business is approved, and I'll go ahead and close this item, and we will welcome back Chair Potter.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. And the last item on the agenda tonight is adjournment. And so I'll now adjourn the Planning Commission meeting to our next regularly scheduled meeting, Tuesday, April 26, 2022.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.
Good night.
Recording stopped.